Everyone. Okay. Okay, so first item is ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
With the favor,
Aye.
okay. Consideration of the minutes from July 20th board meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes?
Not for me.
You have a motion to approve.
I move we approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Okay, those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Quasi judicial hearing regarding PRV 23-09. The CIDA.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. CEDA Incorporated applicant on behalf of the City of Cannon Beach for a rejuvenation project of the Cannon Beach Elementary School buildings and Lakos Park site for use by Cannon Beach visitors and residents, businesses, and the Clatsop-Nahelen Federated Tribe for a variety of community interests. Property is owned by the City of Cannon Beach and is located at 368 Beaver Street in a institutional zone. The application will be reviewed against the criteria of Municipal Code, Chapter 17.44.080-17.44-1, design review criteria. Okay, does anyone object to the jurisdiction of the Design Review Board to hear this matter at this time? Does any commission member believe he or she has a conflict of interest or personal bias? Has any commission member had any ex parte contacts or made a site visit?
Say,
Site visit,
I've consulted with Robert and Steve several times and Anita and I interviewed an architect that has experience in many tribal devices and installations.
okay. Nothing that would be a conflict.
I don't think so.
Okay, good. So, we're ready for the staff.
Sounds good. City of Cannon Beach is proposing an adaptive reuse of the former Cannon Beach Elementary School into a tourism-oriented facility for use by visitors and residents, local businesses, housing interpretive space about local culture, history, and ecology that can host a variety of both indoor and outdoor events and activities. The property was acquired by the city in July of 2020 in order to preserve its historical significance, cultural, and memories for members of the community. The 2.5 acre site is zoned institutional and community buildings and areas that can provide for educational or cultural activities are permitted uses in that zone. There are 3 structures on the property: the classroom building, the gym building, and the prefabricated overflow classroom that houses the local food bank. 2 of the structures, the classroom and the gym, are part of the scope of this project this evening. The food bank is not presently part of the scope, but is something that is being considered for improvements in the future. The 2 structures, the classroom and gym, will be like I said, are part of this project. The landscaping the present landscaping presently consists of an open lawn with some trees located on the western portion of the property, and part of the former playground north of the classroom building is surfaced in asphalt. The proposed rejuvenation project will result in approximately 12,500 square feet of building area. The open spaces on the site will be improved to create outdoor event space, provide for cultural activities, and otherwise enhance an area that is currently open lawn. Spaces for public art, including murals and statues, will be provided as part of this project. I'm not going to go through each of the individual criteria, but obviously there are some that I'm going to highlight. And if anyone has any specific questions or comments, feel free and we can discuss that further, because I'm sure CETA, as part of the presentation, is going to be much more specific about some of the criteria that we're looking at this evening. But with regards to the site design retains the existing locations of the structures, with the exception of the addition that will connect to the classroom to the gym building, that will connect the classroom to the gym building and serve as the primary entrance to the facility. The open space between the buildings and Ecola Creek will see landscaping improvements that enhance its value as a publicly accessible open space. An improved walking trail along the northern edge of the property will connect to the established trail system along the south shore of Ecola Creek. In May of 2023, the Plan Commission approved a setback reduction in order for the design team to be able to create a buffer between the building and Beaver Street, improve sidewalks, provide greater separation for pedestrians from vehicle traffic on Beaver Street, and provide for some off-street parking. The design utilizes the publicly accessible open space and pedestrian trail on the northern portion of the site to connect to the trail system that accesses the downtown and midtown areas. With regards to architectural design criteria, the design makes use of a variety of materials, including cedar shake siding, board and batten siding, concrete and painted metal roof. The exterior cladding is laid out in such a way as to break up the different materials being used in order to avoid excessive monotony and create visual interest. The lighting plan utilizes a variety of fixtures that provide for downward cast illumination in areas generally close to the building. The only incidence of upward cast lighting will be around the statue that will be placed in the entry plaza, and all fixtures are designed to be discrete, dim, or turn off at certain areas between the hours of midnight and 6 a.m. With regards to some of the landscape criteria, the plan submitted will remove non-native vegetation from the project area and replace it with native plants. The existing Sitka spruce trees along the western portion of the property will be retained. The landscape plan includes what is described as a heritage garden, which will have interpretive information and how the plants were used historically by the indigenous peoples. The landscaping plans for the Story Circle and North Courtyard areas are functions based and connect those areas and their potential uses to the structure, allowing for both indoor and outdoor activities that utilize the whole site. The landscaping plan provides multiple public amenities, including walking trails, assembly areas, gardens, benches, art, and interpretive signage. The design creates multiple distinct outdoor areas that can be used for a variety of purposes. And with the staff does believe that the applicant has submitted a complete application and is recommending approval. Dustin Johnson from CETA is here along with his team, and they will be able to provide a presentation to the board this evening.
All right.
Thank you. I'm glad you summarized some of those, by the way. Okay.
So I have a question. So the food bank is not of this application and is not to be considered within any of the criteria?
Right, as part, in terms of the scope of what the project is this evening, it's strictly focused on the elementary school. At this point in time, the food bank is something that's being considered, but at this point, it's not part of the present scope, but it's likely to be looked at as far as how it could potentially be modernized with some exterior finishes down the road so that it's more compatible with what we're looking at this evening.
So,
But it's not a part of the scope of the project this evening or right now. But you certainly obviously can take that into consideration in terms of the surrounding facilities and things like that when you're considering the project.
all right.
Was the food bank building part of the school?
I might need some help.
Yeah.
I don't have the history on that, and maybe when the presentation happens, some of those questions could be addressed.
I think it was a modular classroom that got converted.
Sure.
I think. It was part of school.
Sorry.
I don't understand how you can separate it out. Either it's part of the site, the school site, or it isn't. And it obviously is, so it should be included in this rejuvenation.
Sure. And that's something that the board, you know, can consider as part of this. I think it all comes down to resources.
Okay.
There's such a valuable service going on there. It seems like we should be doing everything we can to support them.
And one of the things, and obviously the board can work with that, but that's certainly a message that we can provide to, you know, the council as part of looking at this, that needs to be strongly considered when, you know, considering this project. So we certainly can pass that message on.
Okay, is there any additional correspondence?
No, there's not.
Okay. So. The call for public testimony. Or pertinent criteria to be considered or
So I have the
staff report
applicant first.
criteria sheets. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward that criteria or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or municipal code, which the person testifying believes to apply to that decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal based on that issue. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional testimony, arguments, or evidence regarding the application. The design review board will grant such requests by continuing the public hearing or leaving the record open for additional written testimony, arguments, or evidence. All persons who testify will first receive recognition from the chair, state their full name and mailing address, and if appearing in a representative capacity, identify whom they represent. Is there a presentation by the applicant?
There is.
You may proceed.
Thank you. My name is Dustin Johnson. I'm with Cedar Architects and Engineers. I'm joined online by our president, Jennifer Beatty. I think we have a couple others trying to make their way on as I'm talking. Here tonight, also as part of our team, we have Joyce Jackson from JLA Architects. She's our landscape architect. And Keegan Peters with Red Plains. They are doing our civil engineering. We've got Dave with Bremick Construction, their CMGC. At the far end there, we're honored to be joined by Dick Bash. Dick has played a critical role having his team of Class F Salem travel members as part of our collaboration on the design of this project. And then I also have Tawab Gohar. We couldn't quite fit him up here at the desk. See that. This is my first time presenting to this group. Very honored to do so, and thank you for the opportunity. This project is very special to everyone who works on it. And it's a very significant piece of property, culturally, historically, ecologically. So as we have moved forward with development and proposals for development on this site, it's always been with the understanding that it needs to be done in good stewardship of those who have lived there before, and respecting the cultural heritage. And like I said, the biodiversity on the site, the historical context that site offers. So I think what I want to do tonight, this site specifically, but also some of the building components, they're just packed full of program. So I think what I want to do is run through the entire project if I could without questions and maybe try to get through that in 15 or 20 minutes and then open the rest of it up to Q&A. I think regardless of how long I talk and read our narrative, you're going to have a lot of questions. I want to make sure that we have time to address those. Yes, I'm going to share my screen with you. All right, that is not the screen I want to share with you.
Harvey, you want to sit here?
I'm fine.
There we go. Try to make this as big as possible. If you need me to zoom in at any point, feel free to let me know. Okay. The cover sheet here is just showing a rendering of what this project could look like as envisioned today. I'm going to leave that up as I just talk through the project introduction. I'm going to start off by reading our narrative. Some of you may have read this. A form of this has been submitted as part of the agenda tonight. Not going to read through all of it, just mostly the first couple of pages. It's pretty dense with information. And then after that, we'll just go through each slide and talk about what that slide presents. So the Cannon Beach Elementary Rejuvenation Project is an adaptive reuse project aimed at reactivating the former Cannon Beach Elementary School and Necus Park site for use by Cannon Beach visitors, residents, and a cultural and ecological interpretive center capable of hosting a variety of tourism-related events and public recreation. The 2.5-acre project site is situated at the north end of Cannon Beach and consists of multiple tax lots. It's bordered by Ecola Creek to the north, First Street to the east, Beaver Street to the south, and undeveloped city-owned property with beach access to the west. As the site of the former Clatsop Nehalem tribal village of Ninkus, for generations, perhaps over 1,000 years, the site is nationally recognized as a culturally significant and is considered one of the last best preserved Native American heritage sites on the West Coast. Given its location on the estuary where Ecola Creek discharges to the Pacific Ocean, as well as the diversity of resident and migrating wildlife that frequent the bordering riparian area, the site is also recognized as both geographically and ecologically significant. Interest among a wide area of public and tribal stakeholders who have been actively engaged throughout the programming and schematic design phases of the project. So next, and that's the project introduction. Next, we'll just talk about existing conditions. This is an existing condition schematic showing direction of prevailing winds, noise considerations, adjacent properties and their uses, the sun path along the azimuth in the winter and the summer, as well as the sun apex. We can dive into specific questions about that as needed. I'm going to pull up just the aerial photo right here as I read through the existing conditions site analysis, and I'm going to be pointing to things with my cursor as I do that. So the site is zoned institutional, as Steve had told us, and is comprised of multiple tax lots. Zoning adjacent to the property includes E estuary, that would be to the north and west, and then park management to the east, and a combination of limited commercial and R3 high density residential to the south. It is located at the northern edge of downtown and tucked against the southern edge of the Ecola estuary. Site vehicular access is by its frontage with Beaver Street right here on the south, as well as with North Spruce Street, which is gravel road here further west. Spruce Street is the access used by patrons of the food bank. A small asphalt paved area exists on site just north of the classroom building. And that asphalt pad is currently used as a vehicle turnaround by patrons of the food bank, as well as miscellaneous recreational uses by NICU's park users. Existing parking for the site is limited to 3 off-street paved stalls at the site's southeast corner. And you can see the 3 cars parked here at the southeast corner. No bus stops currently exist along the site's frontage with First Street or North Beaver Street. However, one is planned for in the current Canada Beach Transportation System Plan opposite the gym building on the east side of First Street. The site is uniquely affected by multiple offsite influences. Sound permeates the site from the west by oceanic activity and from the north and east by vehicular traffic. That'd be from both Highway 101 and First Street respectively. Wind is often present given the site's proximity and exposure to the ocean and propels from the north and west. The site has ample exposure and relatively unrestricted views given that on-site vertical structure and mass are limited. Given its location in a marine climate, the site experiences an annual average rainfall of approximately 72 inches. Steve talked about this a little bit, that there's a significant stand of Sitka spruce existing along the western border of the site. Pointing to that now with the cursor. These provide evening shade from the setting sun and a year round windbreak from western prevailing winds. The estuary bank along the north edge of the property features various native and non-native trees and shrubs of varying maturity. Non-native invasive species, primarily Himalayan blackberry, exist within that estuary bank and will be removed as part of this project. The majority of the site's existing landscaping is manicured turf and used for various outdoor recreational activities by the public and is a popular grazing and bedding grounds for resident elk. The site topography is generally flat. However, grades do drop relatively rapidly along the estuary edge, particularly on that north and northeastern edge adjacent to the estuary there. They drop a little more subtly towards the beach at the west boundary line. The existing relative flatness of the majority of the project site is a result of imported fill to level the site for playground and parking functions during the elementary school use of the site from early to mid 1950s to 2013. Prior to the elementary school existing on site, grades gradually dropped from approximately the existing school structures toward the estuary, with normal high water levels approaching what is now referred to as the north courtyard. That's approximately the edge of pavement up here that's used for vehicular turnaround by the food bank. Due to the current flatness of the site and lack of underground stormwater conveyance, ponding does occur during storm events and quickly permeates into the sandy substrate. The site contains 3 buildings of various construction types and functions. 2 of the buildings were last occupied by Cannon Beach Elementary School and have been vacant since 2013. Those 2 structures in this image are my cursor is hovering over the classroom building, and over to the right towards the east is the gym building. Structure 1, which is what we're referring to as the classroom building in this report, is approximately 4,520 square feet. It's wood framed with a slab on grade foundation. In places, it does have concrete masonry wainscot as well as clay masonry wainscot. The building currently consists of unused classrooms, administrative offices, and ancillary spaces, including a covered walkway on the north side of the building. Structure 2, which we're referring to as the gym building, it is approximately 7,034 square feet. It's a wood-framed barrel vault structure with slab on grade foundation, containing an open vaulted gym space and a 964 square foot classroom mezzanine with cafeteria and ancillary spaces below. The building also contains a 415 square foot addition at the northeast corner. That's this structure here with the white roof on it. And that was formerly used to house the school's kitchen, currently unused. And the last of the 3 structures on site is the food bank. Approximately 3,300 square foot wood frame structure with crawl space foundation. It was just mentioned in the introduction to this project that the food bank is not considered part of this project currently. That is true. However, I do want to convey that it is a significant influence on the development of this site. So we know that the food bank is going to stay and it's going to continue to operate on site, and we have programmed around that. It should be a pretty clean plug and play when that does become part of the scope, if it does, to easily incorporate it. There won't be any adjustments or very, very minor adjustments to site to be able to do that. I expect it'll be mostly architecture. All right, site photographs. Try that again. These are photographs just taken walking around on site. So you've got one in the upper left-hand corner taken from the First Street Bridge across the estuary to the north. Below that is a view of the gravel access off of Spruce Street. So just out of frame, there would be the food bank to the right. You've got the setting sun looking west off of Nichols Park in the center. The upper right-hand photo there is taken at the western boundary of the site. You'll notice a wooden figure there on the left-hand side of the photo. That is what we refer to as Welcoming Man. Welcoming Man is a native-inspired figure intended to greet travelers from the west. Historically, this site, when it was occupied by the ancestors of today's Clatsop-Nehalem members, travelers would be coming from the west, and so greeting facing towards the west would be appropriate. You'll see later on in this presentation that we have a new welcome figure, keeping this one, but a new one that faces east, welcoming today's travelers. And then the food bank there in the bottom right-hand corner. Our next series of photos is mostly the structures on site. So the two on the left are the existing gym building. I will mention at this time, the gym building is a unique structure in and of itself. So this building is basically a building in a box, built up in Alaska, designed by the Air Force, and intended to be a quick way to erect a structure that could be used for aircraft hangar, and they were shipped all throughout the country. I don't know if any of you have walked inside this building yet, but one of the first things that you would probably notice is that there's nothing in there structurally greater than a 2x8. So this was not a structure intended for permanence. But it has withstood the years actually quite well, and we want to see many, many more decades come from it. In the center, there's the classroom building featuring some of the art from our local kids, including, I think Rusty has some art back there. And Mayor Sam, former Mayor Sam. On the upper right hand there, that's the primary access into the gym, and you get through there by what is now a breezeway. I'm going to cruise back up to the aerial right here. In this aerial photograph, you see a structure connecting the gym building to the classroom building. A couple of years ago, these two buildings were scheduled to go through a re-roof and seismic retrofit. When CETA got involved, the school building had already undergone a portion of seismic retrofit and a re-roof. They had started to do some demo work to start re-roof on the gym building. To do that, they removed that connection between the two. So now we just refer to it as a breezeway. So if you hear me talking about a breezeway throughout the presentation, that breezeway has only been there for a couple of years. It's not a historic element on the site. Okay, this is our site development plan. So the proposed site improvements, adding an access entry point to the overall site at the southeast corner, which is referred to throughout this presentation as the Southeast Entry Plaza. Just to the north of the Southeast Entry Plaza, you might have already made it out when looking down on top of it, like we are in plan view, but this is an image of a Thunderbird head. There's a significant Clatsop-Nehalem tale or legend that this derived from, as well as the egg-shaped self entry plaza. And I'm sure that if you were to twist his arm, Dick might offer up what that legend is, but I'm not going to try to reiterate it. I would just butcher it. I would not do it justice. But it is beautiful. Then you've got what looks like a rock river on the screen. Zoom in here. That rock river is a suggestive element. It is a suggestive river. It does offer a stormwater function. The site does drain to this feature. However, the river, the rock river itself does not fill up with water. We have what'd you call it? The underground perforated pipe. Yeah, that would serve as the actual conveyance of water. One of the reasons why we did that, you'll see that the river kind of widens right here and what's kind of surrounded by this black line and referred to as a heritage garden. It was very important for the stakeholders that we talked to, including the general public, that this continue to be a site to be enjoyed by children. So this is an area that we've collaborated with closely with the tribe to create a native inspired play area for children, only using materials that would have been familiar to their ancestors who lived on the site. So the widening of this river feature here is intended to shallow out that area, but create opportunity for kids to climb on larger rocks, nothing big enough for them to throw, but maybe they can flip over and look for creatures like I know my kid would. And then as part of that feature, there's also this open-sided canopy longhouse inspired structure. We show images of what that could look like on our landscape plans, and we'll get there in just a second. Just to the north of that, you heard Steve talk about an existing path on the north boundary of the site. We've taken that path, kept it for the most part where it is now, undulating a little bit differently to accommodate and accentuate some different features of the site. So it does connect back up to the east to what would be a new crosswalk directly opposite that crosswalk. It picks back up to the City of Cannon Beach's nature trail. That little spur, as soon as you come in from the east end of the site on that trail, there is a little footpath that's intended to go down to an area. You'll see that those topographic lines are very close to each other right there. This is not an area for everyone. This is not an ADA accessible element of the site. All it is replanting this area with specific native estuary plantings that would have been there at the time of the Clats of Nehalem occupying the site. And we felt that it was important to show for that adventurous walker what the estuary, even though in this small way, what the whole thing would have looked like. There's no significant grading proposed here, nothing that would require a Corps of Engineers or anything like that to get involved. This is all plantings and a footpath. To the east of that, Nick Hughes Park. So this is the existing function of that space. Important to literally every single stakeholder that we talked to who talked about the park, that we maintain its function to some degree on the site once it's developed. So this is a large, relatively flat outdoor recreational turf. Further to the west, you'll see what is labeled as a story circle and amphitheater. This is not a typical amphitheater that's carved into the ground. We have very real and significant considerations to take into account on this site with potential artifacts. And so very little grading is being proposed on this site. This particular amphitheater actually raises up to a story circle in the center. It's maybe 1 or 2 steps. We see it typically being used as a story circle for maybe anywhere from 10 to 25 people, whether it's small performances or sharing stories around a fire. But it does have the opportunity, as you see here in the lighter green, it's called a driftwood landscape, that this driftwood landscape could be used to see additional families and children to oversee what's going on at the story circle. Likely a slightly larger performance than could be enjoyed from just the story circle itself. We are considering ADA accessibility throughout this site. It is not currently ADA accessible. We feel that it's important, and the tribe feels that it's important that, especially with the story circle and the heritage garden, that those are spaces that can be enjoyed by our elders and anyone with disabilities. So we do have a hard path extending from the north courtyard to a little shaded structure here. That shaded structure is a covered longhouse inspired pavilion, open sided. And again, we'll show images of what that is expected to look like. And then two of the last main features here, the north courtyard. This is kind of the outdoor part of the site. This is envisioned to be plaza pavers done in a pattern to a traditional classic Nehalem weaving pattern. It will be designed so that the current function of cars and patrons for the food bank can continue to drive from Spruce Street onto this north courtyard, pick up their food boxes and exit the site. That is about the extent of vehicular traffic that we foresee happening back here. There could be an occasional service truck for for events that require larger equipment or something that way. But this space, it would have a covered walkway around three sides of the north courtyard, including in front of the existing food bank. That's going to offer sun and rain and just general weather shelter for outdoor events and exhibits for much of the year here when it's cold and raining. I noticed the mistake on our drawing that I want to point out, but before I do that, what we consider to be the sort of indoor heart of the site is this new addition. The new addition happens at the breezeway. And we call it the heritage lobby. And so with the significance of this site, the cultural significance, the ecological and natural significance of the site, what our intentions are is when people first access this site, they are in a space, the Southeast Entry Plaza, that starts to tell the story of the Clatsop Nehalem people to the visitors of the site. We want people who visit the site to leave with a better understanding of this place. That's what helps make it an interpretive center. From the Southeast Entry Plaza, it kind of continues down south of the existing gym building. We still consider that to be very much part of the plaza, to our new addition, the Heritage Lobby. And the Heritage Lobby we foresee as being, or we imagine it being kind of the densest portion of interpretive signage, not only for Clatsop Nehalem, but also for the natural heritage of the site as well. And there's other stories to be told. There's Lewis and Clark, there's the elementary school, and all of those would be told in this space. The mistake that I wanted to point out to you, I just noticed it tonight. The size of the new addition and how much we're demolishing or proposing to demolish on that existing classroom building is less than shown. The classroom building is about, it's got 5 structural bays in it. At first, we thought we were going to need to remove 2 of those and build back the addition from there across the breezeway into the gym building. We were able to program around that 4th structural bay and to be able to propose only removing 1 structural bay. So instead of demolishing almost 2,000 square feet of that building, we're proposing 980 square feet. And then we would build that back as the heritage level. So with that said, new addition is only 1,263 square feet thereabout. So with that new addition, the existing gym building at 7,400 square feet and the existing classroom after demolition at 3,900 square feet, you're around 12,000 square feet minus any mezzanine. And then we have new parking there on the south side of the site. We ended up with 7 new stalls there, as well as a drop-off area for shuttles and carpoolers. 3 existing, so we have a net increase of 4 there. We did seek a off-street parking adjustment from the Planning Commission in January of this year. And they did grant us a reduction. I believe it was from 22 or 23 stalls to 7 stalls. And I'll point out too here while we're talking about this, we have a couple of residential properties on the left there, just to the southwest of the site. Access to those properties is affected by this development. So what we wanted to make sure to do was to collaborate very closely with those homeowners and come up with a solution to ensure that they will have perpetual access to that site in the same capacity that they currently enjoy. So this little space here, almost a triangle, that is an easement. We do provide that exhibit at the end of this presentation and we can visit that. That driveway for that easement is actually the driveway belonging to that, the third structure down in that wide area that I'm hovering over right now. From there, there's a separate access easement to go from that property. It's already established to the 2 residential properties to the north on the same lot owned by the same owner.
Okay. Yeah, if I could just mention real quick that those easements were all addressed already with the property owners. That's all been taken care of already. And those property owners have signed off on that access easement.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
We've already talked about drainage, so I won't spend too much time here. But again, we have a few new catch basins. And the site is very much draining post-development as it is pre-development, with the exception that we are tying building roof drainage into our Bow River. But again, that drainage happens subsurface. It's not within the river itself. After that, we have a site lighting plan. So the site lighting plan, the majority of these fixtures that you're seeing on here. So if you'll recall this curve up here by number 5, that's our ADA accessible path from the north courtyard to our covered pavilion for the story circle. That sort of path of light continues along an ADA accessible path to the north end of the gym. Additional outdoor lighting, we would like to light that covered area at the north courtyard. Those lights are intended to, all lights, as previously mentioned, are downward facing and strive to meet the city's dark sky requirements. These ones specifically, we're trying to light up the structure of the school. Reason for that, all of you I'm sure have driven across First Street Bridge. And the first thing that you're encountered with in beautiful Cannon Beach is Neck-Use Park. And this structure that has been sitting there empty for 10 years, the gym building. It's the largest building around. It is in disrepair. It's going to be absolutely stunning with these outdoor structural elements supporting the canopy, and we want to feature that. That's kind of a greeting to Cannon Beach visitors. Additional lighting scattered throughout the Heritage Garden. Again, this is bollard lighting like it was for the 88 path over to the story circle. Bollard lights, this particular one is proposed 39 inches tall, solar powered. Very low amount of light. It doesn't light a very large surface. We have those throughout the Heritage Garden. We indicate that as bollard light at Heritage Garden as optional. This is, for us, a want, not necessarily must have, but this is an accessible portion of the site. We do envision people wanting to experience the Heritage Garden at night. And so we'd like to provide them a safe opportunity to do so with as minimal light as possible. And then we talked about the southeast entry plaza having a welcoming figure. That's this figure here, standing on top of basalt stone outcrop that we would construct. We do envision this welcome figure being low level illuminated until late night or early morning. I think we had it in our narrative. It turns off at 12 p.m. to 6 a.m. and then comes on again. And then again, just more lights, again, down fixtures, but leading from the Southeast Century Plaza beneath the canopy, just lighting that accessible route and egress route along the south end of the gym and to the main entrance. The last little bit of light is we do have one pole mounted fixture, low, only 14 feet. It's proposed to be fully shielded against glare from adjacent residences. And again, it's just the level of lighting proposed to establish a sense of safety for somebody parking there at night. All right, and then our landscaping plans. These are quite detailed plans. We had originally submitted these plans. This one is an overall plan view of the site with the heritage garden and everything. And then each of the slides past this that blow up western area, the central site, and then the eastern site, the eastern site being first. These images that you're seeing now are new as of yesterday. So what happened between us submitting for design review application and yesterday was some collaboration meetings with some of the Clatsop Nehalem tribal members who are quite literally experts in the field of foraging and horticulture. And so they've influenced this quite significantly. It's not 100% finished, but the renderings that we're going to show you that were done with Joyce literally sitting next to Tawab saying, no, do this, nope, this eye, no, this color, no, this wide, are still representative of what the final would be. Just some of the Latin names are going to change slightly, and with that, shapes of leaves, but the overall size, color, and feel of the space should not be affected. Do you want to dig into specifics of this plantings now, or?
Sure. As Dustin had mentioned earlier, a lot of what you're seeing was essentially a collaboration to create the Heritage Garden. The tribal cultural background that we were trying to reflect is reflected in this garden, particularly as he mentioned, the Thunderbird and the courtyard of the Welcoming Woman. My intent in assisting them in that was to do a couple of things. One is to provide an aesthetic for the community as you approach, as you walk through it, as part of this new park for the city. Also, within that context was to provide some background education about what the plant material was that supported the people that lived here before European intrusion. And we also briefly mentioned the concept of how children play. And some of that is incorporated into that garden. And part of it is in the area right adjacent to the garden, right behind the large building. So we have some new images for what we're anticipating. The playground that we had originally in the first plan that was submitted was sort of, how will I say this, poo-pooed. What we wanted to do was bring it back to a more natural type play. So the image that you see of that large piece of driftwood was in a park, I believe in San Francisco, but I think it would be something that I know my kids would love it. And you can see the driftwood in a little further south where there's all sorts of things constructed. So we're making use of the driftwood for some seating. And this, I don't know that we're ever going to be able to find that particular type of piece of driftwood, but the idea of something that children can climb on and walk across and balance is natural play. So we wanted to include that. That's a little bit different of going into the woods and playing, but what we're trying to do is sort of integrate that. Can you move it over a little bit? Not that way. Yeah, and down just a tiny bit. Okay, no, the other way down.
Gotcha.
I guess that would be up. So as you're going along, underneath this would all be probably engineered pieces of bark, wood chips, so that there is a safety factor too into what we're doing here. You know, the log would be very much secured. The sharp edges would be basically removed. And then we move on into, you know, the stream, which they can make crossovers and get to the other side where you'll see logs on the ground. Kids have a tendency to take any material fall and build a fort or balance on the rocks with a series of logs a little further towards the creek. You can see little rectangles. So it all becomes part of what the kids want to do. We have one option that would be, and there was a picture of it, sorry to keep making you move around, but imaginative play, both on the stream that you're seeing and also on the potential canoe. This is probably a piece of concrete or it could be a log, and kids use their imagination. I don't know that this is the same example, but I know my kids would get on a single bed and pretend they were on a roller coaster, despite, you know, rocking around and doing things. And kids can do that with anything that has some connection to what might have been historically used on this site. And is canoe going to be kept here?
I think at times. Yeah.
Yeah. So we will be having the tribe's canoe. Is it going to be here? Yeah. So this is just another way where kids can see the existing canoe, and then they have their own, and they can play with that for hours going on the river in that one canoe. So that is integrated into, and there is an image of, it could be just a play shed, or it could be a place where where we're having it located, people could sit in the rain and watch activity on the grass area. So it has multiple purposes: for kids play, for kids activities under there in the rainy weather, and parents who want to watch their kids do ball field play. So now, as far as the actual garden, the intent is to use material that the tribe would have used in when they lived here before the Europeans came to the site. There is a little bit of difficulty in designing the garden to provide plants that actually would thrive on this site, but also to provide plants that were a little further away from the particular site, but where people would go to gather them. So the more potentially sensitive plants were placed a little bit more behind the building. And as we go closer to the creek, we're seeing more of the sitka, the alders, some of the willows that occurred there, and some of the shrubs. Like, for example, you'll see the evergreen huckleberries and the salal. In some places I've seen the black twig. Twinberry. I knew the word would come. So they're all incorporated there, and the intent was to create levels. We'll have a ground cover, a medium-sized plant, and some trees for shade to create the aesthetics that we're looking for, to have this be an attractive walkway, but with a natural flair. There are a few adaptive plants that are basically from a different area that are used within the courtyard alongside of the building, just so that I don't get caught for using non-native plants right in that area. Because they're in Cannon Beach and they're thriving, they're doing well. So they are incorporated into the very early part of the courtyard and along the frontage of the building, which is on a different view. In that area, I just want to mention that there was some slope. So when we were trying to fit the shape that we wanted to reflect in the Thunderbird, we are incorporating a boulder retaining wall. It's not very tall. It's about, what did you say, 3 feet or 3 feet at the very end. So we had a flat surface for the garden. Otherwise, we're kind of going along at an angle. So we've created a flat area and with the wall. On the other side of the wall, on the frontage, we have native planting just to make that view a little more attractive as you enter town. Let's see, we have Mahonia, Oregon grape, and the nervosa, Mahonia nervosa, the lower. Or is it well, anyway. Okay, so that's this one entry image. So when you come into town, this is what you're seeing. It's a different look. You feel like you're entering someplace now. Not, the field was nice and beautiful, but now we have something else. And the center is a much more simpler component of the landscaping. Mostly this is showing the grass field, the existing Sitka spruce, and there were a number of small spruces that were planted by children in over the years along that edge, and they will be maintained. The intent is to keep those existing spruce there and remove the blackberries. It's going to be a challenge. Suggesting that in their place, we'd like to use cuttings of appropriate plant material that would help hold the bank. I'm suggesting cuttings because a lot of that bank is stone. I don't want to have to try to dig in it. If we use a cutting, they will root and form the plant material to help maintain the bank. We're very concerned. The river is powerful, has a lot of strength and power. We don't want to do any damage to the bank and are removing a lot of the invasive material. There's a slight, you'll notice there's a couple of trees and a slight berm, and that helps define what you're going to see on the next. So I want to note that the existing plant material that is on the west side is all being retained, even though the spruce that are on the back side of the food court. What we wanted to do was to make a clear separation between the drive aisle that comes in for people accessing the food court from our area where we're creating the amphitheater story center, a story circle. So there's a very rather thick layer of planting, a combination of the evergreen huckleberries which I know grow there. There's a very lovely specimen just on the other side of our property. Doesn't show in this drawing, but it's there. And some other lower plant material combination with it to ensure some kind of real separation between vehicles and people using the site. A couple of added native plant material in there as well. There is a different color for the stipples for the grass material. We'd like to use sort of a native mix of materials, some perennials and forbs and some grasses, and mix it with the driftwood seeding that we talked about. And there's also some on the backflow area that Dustin was talking about, where larger events could occur. An image that you see of the story circle is sort of what we're striving for. I mean, it's not going to be exactly the same. We don't have the same backgrounds, and I think we would use less rock for seeding, probably some, but mostly focus on the material that we have, which is the driftwood, which the city has told us they were allowed to start collecting for use on site. And then the idea of what we're looking for the covered shelter longhouse. And that summarizes. I can go over particular plant material, have people have questions about it. I'd be happy to do that.
Maybe we wait for to get through the rest of it.
Yeah. Later, when we get finished. Probably waiting for it anxiously now.
Thank you, Joyce. Thank you. And then images that we had produced side by side with Joyce, as mentioned. Obviously, some of these trees that you're seeing in this image are quite mature. You know, this is probably what, Joyce, the 30-year-old.
I called it the 20-year plan.
The 20-year plan.
What you're going to see in 20 years. But I'm hoping that we can get fairly large material to start. We'll see how our budget goes.
We have another image that shows all of the more artistic elements and signage on the site, things that have not been designed yet, that we will either have the tribe design or collaborate very closely with the tribe once we establish what those parameters are. The welcoming lady, this is just a figure from our modeling program. It's meant to be a person. We just platted her in wood. This is not what the welcome lady is going to look like, but it should get the idea across. We showed you the image of the welcome figure, the welcome man that looks out towards the west, be much closer to that. This would be a welcoming woman. It has been talked about that she may have a child with her. Seating for a gathering space, again, very lowly lit in our lighting plan that we had shown. We got the gym in the background. And again, trying to use materials that would have been familiar to the ancestors who lived on this.
I just want to mention that the basalt had a pile that she's sitting on was symbolic. There was a cultural reason for that. Based on the origins in the mountains surrounding this area.
This is that story of the Thunderbird that Dick may or may not be able to tell us tonight, but I hope he does. And then this is an image looking in the opposite direction, more towards the center of the garden, looking back towards the Southeast Entry Plaza. You see the welcome lady in the back there in the distance. You can see as you start to enter into this interpretive garden, as you enter it from the Southeast Entry Plaza, it's going to be more of an interpretive learning experience. You're going to see identification of plants alongside the plant that's being identified. But as you progress through this garden, that sort of crutch starts to go away, and it's expected, as a participating occupant in this site, interested in what's going on here, that you are actively learning as you're
In addition to just the identity, there will be some symbols, whether it was a food source, medicinal source, something that they use for tools, to signify the significance of the plants.
Okay, you ready to leave
I'm done.
landscape for now? Okay. We wanted to present a floor plan real quick, so that we won't spend much time on this, but we just want you to be able to associate interior spaces with what you're seeing on the exterior architecture, but also how these elements all connect. So in the center there, you see our heritage lobby. The floor of that lobby might look familiar to you. That's a map of northwestern Oregon, Southwest Washington, the Columbia River dumping into the Pacific. Over to the right is our gym building. We're not adding any new square footage. Well, I should say, we're not adding any footprint area to the gym. There is an existing mezzanine here at the north end of the gym. We're proposing that be removed. It's not in a very solid structural state, but of larger concern than that is that it's comprised of 6 or 8 different levels, floor levels. It's completely inaccessible. It would not be able to be accessed by persons with disabilities. It could only be used for something like storage, which it isn't designed for. So we're proposing to actually remove that mezzanine and build a mezzanine on the south side. This mezzanine is only partial. It goes over the men's and women's toilet rooms. And then you can see an access point to a stair here off of the gym space. That space is primarily for HVAC equipment for the entire facility. So we're not proposing any HVAC that you would see from the exterior. This is all interior. You can access the event space, the gym, independently of the heritage lobby. Reason for that is there are going to be times of the year when this is primarily used by locals for indoor recreation and poor weather conditions, and we want them to have quick and easy access to that point. We do have a catering kitchen in here for food service events. And then over on the left-hand side of the image, the west side, this is your existing classroom building. We talked about there being 5 structural bays. What you're seeing here is 4. Each classroom took up 1 full structural bay. So each of these walls is load bearing in between the classrooms. This one over here that has additional men's and women's toilet rooms, an IT room, an office, and some storage and electrical room. This was the 4th classroom. This is what we were able to design around and say, no, we can keep this. We can keep those structural walls, slightly modify them. It's got a new roof on it. Let's keep the bones. But we are reprogramming that space, not as a classroom, but to support the lobby. Again, toilet rooms, IT space, a facilities office. Just off screen here, over to the left, would be the food bank. There is the food bank. These little posts, you see these circles outside, those are the round columns supporting the overhead structure. It's very important to our tribal stakeholders that these columns be round. We envision them to be a Western red cedar that would be turned on a lathe to maintain the same diameter across the full length of the log, but still have a hand-hewn finish. Anywhere you see these circles on the exterior, they are supporting an overhead canopy and have that similar language going on. All right, our next image, we have elevations in here. We did add, I believe there was a request from one of our commissioners tonight that we provide some information on the height of the classroom. So we did get that in here. The classroom building has a sloped roof. We are matching that slope. I believe it was a 112, is that right? 112. 1 to 20 slope on that classroom building. So the new Heritage Lobby would mimic that slope. But the height of the classroom building, the information that was not previously on this sheet. So at the low end, your top of plate elevation is 11 feet and your high eve at the opposite end is 13 feet. And then above that, you just have the roof assembly plus or minus 6 inches. I won't spend any time on these. It's mostly, these are technical drawings. They have the different levels and heights of the buildings on them, and we can refer back to these as you ask questions. Material board. So we looked at the fully rendered image of this. I believe it was this exact view. This is a less rendered image to better be able to show them that the materials that we are envisioning for this structure. On all the roofs that you can't see at ground level, which is basically just the barrel vault roof and then the little lean-to at the northeast corner of the barrel vault roof that used to house the school's kitchen. We are proposing a standing seam metal there. It was mentioned in the opening remarks in the staff report that that was painted metal. If it is a colored metal, it would be pre-finished by the manufacturer, a baked on product. It's not something painted in the field. This would be finished that lasts for decades. And then the cedar shake, of course, that's what's on the building now. We would be removing that cedar shake on the existing building. It's time for replacement. But you probably see up here, something that gives a lot of interest to this building that it doesn't currently have is just a little bit of a shadow line at the top of that barrel vault. So we are extending that roof a little bit at the ridge and then tapering it down to its existing condition as you get towards the base. We talked about the barrel vault, or some call it a quinset hut, not being designed to be a permanent structure. Part of that is how it meets the ground. Like I said, there's nothing bigger than a 2x8 other than what's supporting the existing mezzanine that's coming down. But to create that big free spanning vault, nothing bigger than a 2x8, it meets the ground with really no barrier to water. So right now, water freely goes at grade into the wood structure, and is one reason why we're having to re-roof and do some other things. So you're going to see on these images that we have a little concrete stem wall at the base there. That sits proud of the existing wood structure. There is an option to actually remove the lower portion of the structure and build that concrete wall directly underneath. I don't think it's necessary. This is basically just to create a permanent water barrier so we can stop water from entering the foundation of this building, which is also the roof. And then we continue that language around the classroom building, around the addition, the infill addition. We talked about our round Western cedar columns. We are showing a nature-inspired, perhaps a native-inspired door here. This was another thing that I had initially thought that we might gray out and just show it as more suggestive. This is what we presented at community outreach events. This is another element that is going to be designed in tandem with the tribe. It is not going to be what you're looking at right now. But the idea is that it is a solid wood door. It's carved. It might have a little bit of glass in it, and it's going to be used as a part of the interpretive value of this site for telling that cultural heritage piece. As we come across those items, I'll identify them. We have signage proposed. It's not shown on this graphic here. Again, at the point that we had submitted this to design review, I don't think we even knew what this place was actually going to be called. So we don't have signage. We just had blade signage shown on there. You probably recall it. I'm going to pull it up again from our opening image. Just simple blade signage, expected to be wood, and it might have letters that line up. But it's not part of this application. It would be a separate signage application. So I was hoping not to spend too much time on it. However, we do anticipate it to be a vertical blade style sign of wood construction, similar to what is depicted here. See if I can find where I was again. Okay, other materials, more tongue and groove, vertical cedar siding finish. So we're looking at different ways to use this traditionally vernacular material in this area. So we use it in shake form. We use it as vertical siding. And then, of course, using it as structure itself. We do propose limited use of painting that cedar, in this case, board and batten, purely for a little bit of visual, just get some color on there. We're trying to represent this image somewhat accurately in that when we initially install this wood, it's going to be beautiful, like this image over here on the right, this really rich red, Western cedar look, that's going to fade within the first year. And it's going to be kind of a brownish gray, and then ultimately it'll silver out. And instead of going through and painting the whole thing, we want to embrace that. There's a lot of that unfinished silvering of the wood. There are methods to treat the wood, however, none of them are permanent, and it becomes a maintenance for the life of that. Limited use of paint. Here we're showing green as an accent color. And we're almost through this presentation, I promise. Here on the north side, it was important to the public stakeholders that we talked to have a space that was open at the north end and could open to an exterior function, thereby supporting the interior function. So you might be using this space, renting out this space on an absolutely gorgeous, windless, sunny day, decide to just open that venue up to the north. We call it the reception courtyard. And then you can see the beginning of the three-sided canopy around the north courtyard there on the right-hand side. The concrete that we are showing, when we initially presented the concept of concrete to the Clatsop Nehalem tribe, there was a little bit of fear that it was old. It's not a material that would have been known to their ancestors, however, has significant current value as a building material. So what we would propose to do is try to treat that with a wood texture by either using board formed concrete or a liner formed concrete, a liner that's already been formed to natural wood. Usually get a little bit better finished concrete product with those. And then TPO roofing. I'm going to show you a couple more images that I was not planning to bring in tonight. We uploaded them a couple of days ago. Oftentimes find these more distracting than not. I guess before I get to those, I have a couple more images to show you. These are the classrooms from the North Courtyard. One thing that you see in elementary schools a lot is the use of colors and primary colors, bright colors to engage the children. We talk a lot about the Clatsop Nehalem tribe throughout the development of the design of this project, but we also don't want to lose sight that this was a beloved community asset as an elementary school, and we want to pay tribute to that. So we still want this to reflect the character of children playing and laughing, and this is one way that we do that. And the backside of the Heritage Lobby from the North Courtyard, very similar language, identical materials. Front. Okay, this is a view of the Southeast Entry Plaza. This is what we did have grayed out as things that are not fully designed, that are more artistic in nature and that are going to be part of the interpretive value of the site to be collaborated with the tribe. The one caveat to that is going to be this large grayed out area right here in the center. From the very beginning, we had anticipated or envisioned that this Southeast Entry Plaza is going to be a place that activates this site. And so part of that is to have an image of a wall mural, large, human scaled. And the thought behind this too was that Cannon Beach is in a very artistic community. What we had envisioned was that this could become an annual or a biannual competition, and the winner gets to present their painting in full scale, which is just about every painter's dream, right? Is to go to a scale like this and present their work for a year or two before it gets switched out to the next painter's work. Again, the blade signage where it's at, but grayed out, not fully designed and not part of this application. So we had a Thunderbird right here. One thing that I find kind of beautiful about the Thunderbird garden is that when you're in it, you would never know that you're in a Thunderbird head. What are all these paths? Why are they the shape that they are? So as part of that experience, as either you're wandering through it, perhaps before, perhaps after, there will be an image of a Thunderbird somewhere that explains the story that you may get to hear tonight. And then an image, a much more striking image when there's actually a painting in the background that's not grayed out. But again, we don't know what that's going to be, so we grayed it out. But that is the connection between the Southeast Century Plaza to the Heritage Lobby. I won't talk about it in great detail, but there was a right-of-way vacation of part of North Beaver Street. Part of that was to create this connection. The existing gym, the face, that south face, that towering south face of the gym is only 5 feet off of the existing property line. So to get around that to your main entrance, you have 5 feet. And people in the Southeast Century Plaza, you've got cars parking along the street. We felt like we needed to extend that Southeast Century Plaza, south side of the gym, give people and their kids and pets a nice, wide, safe travel lane to get to that front door. And that was the main purpose for that 20 feet of acquisition of North Beaver Street. Go backwards here. And this is mostly the classroom building. So the classroom itself, right now, there's a lot of brick. You don't see a lot of brick in Cannon Beach. And what we're going to be doing as part of the seismic retrofit of the school building, I talked a little bit before that there's already been some seismic retrofit work that's all above deck. And that was part of the re-roof. So now we have to go in and do seismic retrofit work for the superstructure and the foundations. Part of that is eliminating how much glazing there is on that south wall in order to get some opaque wall in there for shear value. And for those of you who may not know, shear is a lateral force. So if you think of a shoebox and you start cutting holes in the side of it, and the top becomes easier and easier to twist because there's not as much shear in that box. That will be part of the seismic retrofit to meet current code. At that point, we're removing just about all of the brick. So it does need to be replaced either with like finish, but like I said, as beautiful as I personally find brick, it's just not a common material out here on the coast. So we would propose to tie that back into the Heritage Lobby in the gym building with use of cedar shake. And then of course our concrete wall base there. I think we get to the image I had started talking about, the aerial images. See a lot of white in these images. This is a TPO roof. This is a cool roof. This is part of our energy conservation measures for this building. Cool roof is defined differently amongst different standards and manufacturers. We would be targeting a cool roof that has a solar reflectance index of 95 or greater. What that means is it does not absorb a lot of heat. That's a very good thing for this climate for buildings that get continual use. There are other types of buildings like elementary schools and middle schools that don't get used during the hottest parts of the month. You may consider moving away from a cool roof strategy, not this place. So right now, we're in conversation with the Energy Trust of Oregon. They're currently doing a solar survey And we're going to see there's 1.5% of this project that's required to be spent towards green energy. And so part of what that solar study is going to do is inform us how effective solar panels could be used in tandem with our cool roof as energy conserving and energy producing measures for the site. Again, these white roofs that are so plainly seen in bird's eye view, they're proposed to be white TPO because you won't see them. That is the intent. And then one more aerial view. Keep in mind too, this roof right here over the classroom, that is already re-roofed. It's already white. We'll look at the specific product used and the solar reflectance index and see if we need to mitigate with a higher solar reflectance with the new roof, if it doesn't meet our standard. Our energy conservation measures, so daylighting where we can. If you've ever been inside those existing classrooms, you walk in there in the evening in the golden hour and that daylight is perfect in there. And it's something we know we're going to lose a little bit of windows on the south side. We know we're going to lose our clear windows on the north side, but we're gaining a lot of light on that north side, indirect light. And I think we're going to have a very similar balance to what's there. LED lighting, wherever we have lighting, occupancy sensors throughout. And then minimal outdoor lighting with controls for automatic dimming. We say here from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. That could be negotiated to times if you allow it. HVAC, won't get into too much of this, but really efficient energy recover ventilator. Like I said, all of our HVAC equipment will not be seen from the exterior. It won't be seen from the interior unless you happen to be in the mezzanine space. Yeah. Okay, we're getting real close to the end here. These last two exhibits are, this is the 20-foot right-of-way acquisition or vacation of North Beaver Avenue, leaves Beaver Avenue with 30 feet, which is more than enough for a two-way lane to be maintained. And a little bit of shoulder space as well. It also shows this little hexagon hatched area. That's our easement that is in place and done in collaboration with our adjacent residential property owners. And then our last exhibit, make them helpful in addressing any questions, is the existing conditions. So with that went a lot longer than I was expecting. I'm getting hoarse. I'm excited to hear notes and impressions and answer whatever questions we can.
The big question, elephant in the room, is all of this that you're proposing fit into the budget?
Yes. And actually, we've got Dave with Brentnick here to speak to that a little bit. So do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, the design that you all saw is what we've been tracking for the past 9 months and pricing along the way. So it's
That's good to know because track record has not been too good on that lately. Midtown restroom project.
Since you bring that up, and I know it's not in our purview, but you brought up the restrooms. I feel like incorporating gender neutral restrooms are really important. I know it has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with the inside, and I've gotten in trouble for talking about this before. But I also feel like I'm saving the city money because I think eventually it's going to be the law. So it's actually on the proposed bill in California to have gender neutral restrooms by 2025 in all schools. So I would consider that has nothing to do with us, not our purview, but I'm just going to say it.
I appreciate the thought. And,
Yeah.
you know, well, it's not in the international building code yet, or even in our state code. When it comes to plumbing fixtures, in existing buildings, it is something that can be overridden by the local building official. So we will engage in those conversations. Make sure that what's proposed reflects. And
And it's important.
Most of the questions I had referred to the site plan. If you could go back to that. Drawing 03. That one. You're maintaining this driveway that comes in around the food bank, is that correct?
yes, maintaining it in its current form as a gravel driveway, not a paved driveway.
So the courtyard itself, what is the material that's being used? It's not referenced anywhere that I could.
Glad you point that out. Those are envisioned to be concrete pavers. Plaza pavers that would match what we're doing out in the Southeast Entry Plaza.
So are they suitable for vehicle
Yes.
traffic?
Yes, not for roads. In that, not for consistent traffic all day long, but for the traffic that we're talking about. Yes,
There are traffic related ones. We have an area that's sensitive.
these will be on higher traffic areas envisioned to have that look of plaza pavers. They will often just pour concrete and form it to look like it has pavers. But in something that sees the level of traffic that we're looking at from the food bank, just plaza pavers that aren't on pedestals, that are installed directly over a crushed rock gravel base will support vehicle travel.
So since there's no off-site parking provided for any large event like a concert, would it be appropriate to use that courtyard for vehicle parking?
It's a difficult question. My opinion is no. The reason for that, and we have been all over the map on this as a community talking about parking and how are you going to accommodate. This is a cultural and natural interpretive center. Literally, arguably, the most significant part of this site is beneath that north courtyard. How do you tell that story with cars parked on it, with it being paved?
This would only be, short term, like for an event. Could be controlled with a gate. But, in spite of what the planning commission has agreed to, if you can't get there, you're not going to attend. I live in Cannon Beach, but I'm 3 miles away from this facility. I'm not going to walk to a concert. If I can't park within a couple of blocks of the location, I'm not going to go. You're spending, I don't know how many $1 million to revitalize the site. Not making it easy for people.
So one thing I would say about that, and I recognize that very much. And we are going to be catering to, we've got a pull-out area for shuttles. We're hoping that the city's going to, be active in establishing public transportation for these events. But the two real major things I see going for this argument for less parking is maybe better for this site from an overall perspective. Number one, the city controls the schedule. This is not a private venue. It is not going to be used for large events in times of the year, or in some cases, times of the day that aren't going to permit for large capacities of individuals to use the site without having nearby off-site parking, or nearby on-site parking. The other thing I would say is that the city had commissioned for their transportation analysis, a survey to be done of the available on-street and off-street parking throughout different times of year at peak traffic demand hours and per that survey, and I'm happy to provide you a copy of that. There's quite sufficient parking on street within 2 blocks of this site.
Arguable.
Yes, everyone that lives in Cannon Beach complains about the parking already. This would just add to it.
I've seen confrontations in person about that, someone parking in front of someone else's house. It's a very sensitive subject here.
There again, it's not really part of it.
It's just hard to find parking downtown.
In addition to, so that survey identifying the on-street potential, it also identifies local nearby businesses with off-street parking potential for shared parking agreements.
What you said about not being used for large events, is that true in general, or what? I missed what you said about that.
There would. Oh, go ahead.
Timing?
That the city has control over the schedule of this building, of this site. So it will be scheduled appropriately based on the time of year, tourist season versus not tourist season, Saturday versus Monday. Excuse me?
You really think so?
Yes. Hey, if it's not, they're the ones who have to deal with it, right? I think they're motivated.
Have any questions?
Well, thank you for that very detailed and explanation of this very ambitious project the city is taking on. And having had children that went to the school, I'm familiar with it, what the classrooms were, the gym. The landscape, I keep thinking about the elk, and I counted the wonderful landscape plan and the thousands of plants that are going to be put in there. And I keep thinking about the elk herds that came through our neighborhood just last week and pretty much destroyed my garden. I don't know about anybody else's, but that is a place that they frequent. And I don't know that they're going to understand that this is now a sacred heritage, beautiful place to gather. And I don't know what the city's going to do if that happens. And I don't know about driftwood, when it's right on the beach and making a garden out of it. It just seems a little bit silly to me. But certainly supportive of the idea behind all of this, but it does seem to have quite a large price tag without really any definite known uses, maintenance costs annually, how it's going to be managed, if Public Works is going to take over the gardening. And lastly is that we currently have an ordinance that closes our parks at dusk for any use. So when we talk about having, nighttime events there, the city's going to have to deal with that as a special event. And then I don't see any fires being allowed. Just off the top of my head right now, those are kind of some things. Oh, and actually the last thing is the metal roof on the gym. And I can just think of the acoustics inside of rain on metal and how, is there going to be some soundproofing or?
There is, I'd love to address that. So part of the re-roof is installing R38 continuous insulation over the top. So between the existing roof deck and the metal roofing, it's going to be very well insulated from not just a thermal standpoint, but acoustically as well.
Mhm.
In addition to that, just the shape of the gym itself, it acts like an instrument. That can be good, that can be bad based on the type of acoustic performance that might be going on inside. So there will be cost-effective acoustical treatments on the inside at the roof level to help absorb sound, to help direct sound where you want it. Those will all have a positive effect on keeping the sound of falling right now.
Mhm.
Back to the plants for a minute. I think I may have miscounted, but I think there are like 150 different varieties. And I wonder if seems like there are a lot.
Varieties of plants.
Will Public Works be able to, I mean, how many of those in 5 years be there? How will we maintain this? It is a pretty wonderful thing to do naturally, but how will we maintain that? And keep it the way that you're designing it?
I'm not ignoring you, but I have to apologize. My hearing is not good and I'm not hearing everything you're saying.
Yeah, nor is mine, so. I think I counted
150.
maybe 150 different varieties of plant. And would you be better off to select plants that most likely were there? And you know, a lot of plants don't do well here in Cannon Beach. Some do very, very well. But anyway, just something else about the landscaping. It's a lot of varieties and a lot to ask the city to maintain.
Well, a lot of them are native and ideally, once they're established, and I agree with you, it is going to be a challenge and I'm not sure if the city is going to be willing to do this. I know at one point fencing was not an option. But I know I dealt with elk on a different project, it was Colorado. And any new plant, like a tree or a shrub, or an area needed to be fenced, even if it was a plant that the animal doesn't normally eat. They love young anything. So I don't know if there would be a consideration for temporary fencing around the site to at least get to the point of establishment. And then,
Do you foresee this area as being someplace that if you're just walking down the street, you would just go wander in? Or is this a place that you're going to go through the building and look at the murals and then go out into the garden and walk the trails?
I think it could be either. You know, if you're in the building and you want to see, you know, the building will have some description of what the garden is about. And then, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's go and see what it was like 100 years ago or so, and what the plants were.
Well, primarily it's used just as a pathway to get to the beach right now, you know, and so that's
Yeah,
something that I feel that I would like to see as a community member here, is to have a place that you can just go maybe have a picnic rather than just you walk along and you look at a plant and then you see another plant. That it would be a place that would be inviting for the locals of this community to go sit with their family and go to the beach and play. I guess is my kind of vision that I'm getting to for that area, rather than having it be such a, in my view, a high maintenance, formal ornamental garden, given the fact that it's got native plants, but it just seems very structured and not necessarily a place that you would hang out. I think it should be.
Well, I think the rest of the site provides a lot of that component. You know, if we clear out the bank and replace it with other material, and as the trees that are planted along there mature, I you know, we wanted to maintain the large grass area, and that was one of our commitments. I don't know if you're suggesting that planting occur, you know, sort of randomly throughout the site, along the banks.
I don't know.
Or maybe just the garden seems like something that doesn't.
I mean, I guess in my mind, I'm just seeing like groves of trees with a picnic bench, you know, and maybe a pathway, and you'd come across maybe a small area that would have native plants that you could learn about. And maybe that would be more rotating, just given we'll see what the elk do with them, type of a thing. But to me, that would create a more welcoming local component to this project if we could do something that, you know, it's a park and we live here and want to be able to go sit there and have a picnic without maybe necessarily, you know, unless we have visitors or guests, definitely would take them.
Am I understanding that it's supposed to be like you're meandering through and you're identifying each plant and you're saying what the purpose of the plant was? Is that the?
That's the intent for the close part. And then once you get a little past, if you go sort of parallel across where the back courtyard is, it becomes much more natural, sort of what you're describing, where you know, we have understory plant material, but it's a lot of you know, the spruce, alder that are growing there normally. You probably have a bark dust understory where there's not all shrubs. I think that might work for part of what you're describing. I don't know that it answers what you're you know, suggesting, but you know, there is a component of that within the garden. It's not all garden area per se. And, you know, it's not meant to be exact. You know, we have to identify where the plants are going to go, but, you know, as they spread or mature, it's, you know, people aren't going to come along and trim and, you know, plant new flowers or anything. The biggest,
Well, and I see the
with
budget as
the elk.
no a consideration if that wasn't such a huge item. I think I counted almost 1,200 plants from this landscape legend, and that just, you know, to put that many plants, and given the probability that the elk are going to come through there, and to not make it so structured.
Yeah, it's unlikely that
I don't know.
tribes had that many different varieties right here in Cannon Beach. So, I mean, they are native plants to the northwest, but are they really, are they ones that were here?
He's questioning, were there really 150 plants on site?
Right. Right.
No, and that's what I was trying to convey earlier, that and there might be more than you would think, because when you think plants, you think of something like this or something tall, you know, not necessarily the things that are on the ground that you don't really tell one from the other. So I'm looking at, I've made a list of the plants. So I would say this page doesn't have 150, but And I don't think this adds 150 either.
There's 43.
Oh, he
You know.
counted. Thank you very much. 43. But some of those are what grew along the bank. Sedges and the tufted hair grass and the bulrush and the silverweed. And I don't know, those are in that lower area where we were describing the go down to the bank. And I will just kind of say that is the one portion along the river where the slopes were, you could potentially kind of get down to a lower level without breaking your neck. There are, the contour lines sort of broaden out and it's more like a 2 or 3 to 1 slope. That's kind of an aside, sorry, but that's where we're suggesting that that's the educational feature of what grew there. So,
I love the idea of an interpretive native garden, but I am worried about the elk. Like I love that idea, an interpretive native garden, here for it, but
So,
like,
all I can suggest is that although a fence was not wanted at all,
but that's for like a fence for
I,
like 2 years till it's established. I mean,
yeah, there are plants that they're going to eat over time,
They can jump over a fence.
yeah,
especially in the spring. They're hungry
yeah.
and they look yummy.
Have a feeding station elsewhere.
No? Any discussion
other
about
questions?
site? or
Mhm.
Anything else about site or? I feel like there's so much that I don't know that I'm really ready to.
Let's move along with the game plan here.
The what?
I had some other questions. I spoke to a representative of the tribe maybe a year or so ago, and I was talking about perhaps we could put up a totem. And he was quite offended. He said, we were not a totem culture. And so these welcome men and women seem to be kind of totemy. And are they okay with that?
So we have a member of Flats of Nayland here who can speak specifically to that, but I do want to say that I think any non-native member who has attempted to try to collaborate on a design in the Pacific Northwest directly with the tribe at some point makes that mistake about mentioning totems or teepees or something that way. Absolutely. It can be very offensive. And he's right. Flats of Nehalem were not a totem using people. That said, what we showed you in terms of the welcoming person, the existing welcoming man, out towards the west, you might interpret that as being kind of totemy. Totem was a very specific thing. That was actually designed in collaboration with the tribe, I think, by a tribal member.
The original, if I can jump in.
Please, Dick.
Welcoming man that's on the beach was carved by an artist from Quinault, who has family from Flats of Nehalem that was transported up there when Indians were moved around, and so he carved that and does carve. They're not considered totems, but they're considered like a welcoming figure that can include a person, maybe a fisherman that has salmon. It represents a person rather than totem figures. And in today's cultures in the Northwest, they're either representation of what used to be years ago, or they're figures that tribes are incorporating into their contemporary culture in today's culture of welcoming. And, you know, it's a good use of an art form that has sort of not had a place in the modern world. You know, that the art form of carving canoes, carving bowls, just carving has really gone to the wayside over the years just because of modern cultures. And so artists are reviving an art form, and it's used in many areas as a way to welcome people, a way to provide good feelings from one group to another group. But you're absolutely right. We never had totems. We did have carvings of humans that were used to convey messages. And I have always used the example of long time ago. We were visited by groups canoeing up and down the coast, and we would have a welcoming figure. Some villages would have welcoming figures, and if there was something going on within the village that was like, no, no vacancy, sort of, the figure was turned inward, away from the group coming in, and so they would just mosey on to the next village or whatever. And so the welcoming figure is sort of a representation of that practice of long ago. And some villages did that and some didn't. And, you know, we try to bring some of yesteryear's culture into today's world, especially if it's a good welcoming group kind of a interaction. So that's what that was, a long answer for. Thank you. Sorry. If I can, Dustin, the Thunderbird Garden is that image that's up there. The Thunderbird is, and maybe is there a way you can flip it sideways? So the Thunderbird image is actually
It's upside down.
That's upside down.
That's upside down.
But at any rate, if it's on its side, that
There it is.
there's the eye and then the beak. There'll be it will be like a logo, and there'll be interpretive signs there. A short version of the story, that our creation story, with it. All of the tribes around here are from the Thunderbird. Thunderbird's nest was Saddle Mountain. If you look at Saddle Mountain from a variety of different spots, it looks like a nest. And we all the tribes that circle Saddle Mountain pretty much have the same creation story. And that is that Thunderbird, that was her nest and was full of eggs. She got in a fight with another being that was called Southwind, the wind that brings all the storms. And those two had a conflict, and Southwind went up to Thunderbird's nest and tossed all of the eggs around out of the nest. And they all rolled down the many sides of Saddle Mountain. And wherever they landed and cracked open, that was the origin of a tribe. And so Clatsop, Nehalem, Chinook, Tillamook, all have very similar stories, and that's why Thunderbird that's the story. It's a much longer story, but that's it in a nutshell, of why Thunderbird is so important to the tribes in the area.
Thank you, Dick.
Nice, but there's no place that you'll ever see that
Mhm. There's no flight planned.
unless you're flying over it in a balloon or a
Well,
drone.
but it will be represented on the interpretive signage
Okay.
and all that. But I agree totally with what you were saying to me about the elk and all plants. There needs to be some kind of something done about the elk, because
Well, I'm not in any way suggesting that we remove the elk. That's what you're thinking.
I'm not about the elk problem.
I learned to live with the elk.
Okay,
All right.
I'm not saying remove them either. I'm just saying it's a problem and we need to do something to resolve it.
So I just want to jump on that. We were asked initially to just amongst our own design team, how are you going to deal with the elk problem? And we came back in our conversations with Dick and other members of the Clatsop-Nehalem tribe, and we could do, this type of an enclosure or a fence that's not really, doesn't look like a fence, but acts like a fence, but it'll keep the elk out. The answer was always the same. Our ancestors learned to live with the elk. And that needs to be the solution here.
Ultimately, it does.
Michelle, you have any question?
I had a question about the cool roof. Do you know the pipe along?
It's thermoplastic polyolefin, TPO.
DPO?
Yeah. A single ply membrane system has a scrim in it, different thicknesses.
Yeah, I personally don't have an objection to the white, but they need that kind of reflectivity here in Cannon Beach. We just seldom get the house overheated.
No, understood. The same question gets asked about solar panels in the Pacific Northwest. Is that really effective? It is. We will do what Energy Trust of Oregon is working with us on is to find out just how effective that can be to see if it is worth considering that as a green energy strategy for this project.
Yeah, solar panels might prove okay, but I'm not sure why if you really need that kind of reflectivity on a roof here.
And it certainly is more effective in, say, the desert Southwest, right? You see a much more return on that investment. However, yes, in this climate, at this latitude, in the Pacific Northwest, it is still better for a building, and this has been modeled, and it is different. Like I said, it's different for elementary schools than it is for a building that gets used year round. But for a building that gets used year round on the 45th, between the 45th and 46th lateral, and even in Cannon Beach, it is more effective, more energy effective to use a cool roof than a hot roof. There are times when we would go ahead and specify a hot roof, and we've done that quite a bit for elementary schools, middle schools, because they're not having to cool in the dead of summer when the kids aren't there and no one's there. But you're right, that you do reach a certain point of latitude on the Earth's surface, but also not having the hours of sun in a day or in a year to where you'd see any kind of benefit from. Yes, you do in Cannon Beach. It's not, like I said, it's not as significant as it is in Southern California, Nevada, New Mexico. It is still an energy saving measure in this climate.
Yeah, you're assuming the HVAC here will have to be working a fair amount of the summer.
And so I do apologize, I don't have represented here in our panel tonight, our MEP engineer. But actually, his strategies for this building, considering climate and its orientations, he's saying that we will not have to cool this structure in the time, at least not the main structure.
We plan to cool it.
It could be that we have something like destratification fans, the big fans up, in high bay scenarios like the gym that push air back down to our level. But no mechanical cooling. One quick thing I would say about, when we talk about this 95% solar reflective index for TPO roofs, that doesn't mean if you were looking at it, that 95% of the light is being directed back into your eye. It's not a mirror-like surface. It's not reflected in that way. It's reflecting UV radiation, not light. I just want to be clear about that. This isn't not a glare issue.
Unfortunately, I'm an engineer and I've done tons of HVAC and pipeline roofs, et cetera. So I was curious what you're doing.
No, I appreciate it. And I can get you more details certainly from Cezanne.
Is this rock area, is it sunken like is it a bioswale? Is that what we're talking, this rock where?
It's formed like a bioswale, but it does not fill up with water like a bioswale.
There's a French drain underneath?
Essentially, yes. Yeah, water drains beneath it, not through.
So, okay,
The rock is quite high.
but it's not sunken in, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Worried about somebody falling in.
That was part of the problem. I mean, for it to actually work, it became steep. So we solved that.
Yeah,
Handful of meetings I was with the city, they were concerned that the river would back up into the swale if we made it deep enough to drain. So we didn't really want to have backwater under the high tide event.
Is drainage from the roof going to be directed to this area? All the rain that comes off
It'll be
gym and the,
directed towards the swale, but we'll have piping underneath the swale to convey the water out. Just, if that backs up, it doesn't backing up into a pipe with a check valve on it. So it doesn't back up in the system too badly. We don't get debris up into the swale and onto our site. We're trying to keep the river away from our site as much as we can. We don't want to give it a nice pathway up into our project.
but the purpose is drainage and playing. I'm a little confused, like kids are playing on the rocks and it's drainage, but it's not really drainage.
Well, the pipes are underneath it. They're doing the drainage. So the kids can, it's like walking on a sidewalk. There's drains underneath the sidewalk.
The pipes will be buried a couple feet below.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a layer of soil and then, decorative rock that's intentionally placed, and thought through, like Dustin said, not too big, not too small, just, right. Yeah.
Are there any presentations by other proponents? Jan.
I'm not a professional person, I'm just a person. But I am for this. Is that what you mean?
Pardon?
Do you mean just regular people?
Regular people.
Okay.
In favor of project proponent.
Well, I am in support of this project. I know the community wants to simplify it wherever we can. And I would love to still try to do that in some way, shape, or form. Won't lose wonderful work at the same time. So it's a really tricky issue. And I know for everybody is wanting to be supportive, but also struggling in some ways. So, but I overall totally, want this project to go forward. And what I'm trying to understand at this moment is the process regarding this. Is this the only public hearing to be deciding the architectural design, the site plan, and the landscape design? Or will it be continued? What are you folks seeing as, is tonight it for this DRB, or will it be continued?
I could address that if you'd like.
Pardon?
I said I could address that if you'd like.
Please.
So this evening, the city is coming to the design review board with the plan that you see before you this evening. This is the plan that's presented. The design review board has the option to approve with conditions, deny, or continue. So there is the possibility that this could be approved this evening, and that would be the end of the discussion in terms of that would be an approval, I should say, that would approve the proposed architecture, landscaping, and site design that you see tonight. So it could be a final decision this evening. Could they continue it? Could they do things like that? Yes.
And what about tweaking? If it is approved tonight, then what about going forward? Say we're talking about the elk, and I do have a suggestion about that, which I don't want to forget. And that is that Lisa Kerr, one of our city council people, she has a whole informational packet of things that the plants that elk do not enjoy. But you really might want to get a hold of that. I'm hoping she'll send that to the whole community, because we all want the elk, I mean, most of us, but we also want to have a few plants. So anyway, that's something to look into. That would be, I think, really helpful. And that might simplify the plantings eventually at this site. But we also I want to support the medicinal plants, especially that the tribe is wanting to educate us about. So anyway, it's a complex undertaking, but I think we will get there. It's just, I think we will need to tweak things as we go. So that's what I'm trying to understand the process. So if it's like a general approval tonight or in the next meeting, if there is a continuation, then tweakings here and there from what you learn as you go can still occur. I think.
Yeah, discussions yet to happen in terms of the decision that the board makes. Is that a potential possibility? Yes. However, at this point in time, what the board is looking at is what's presented to them. So those are the discussions that they will have during their deliberations when they make those decisions.
Okay, then I'm sorry, can I just go through a few questions? Let's see. One thing I wanted to bring up, there is a huge laurel right next to the bridge, the First Street Bridge, which is right on the riparian area. And I have begged for people to save that, even though it's technically not a native plant. I'm wondering if, somebody can look at that plant, and I don't know if you've told me about it, but maybe that could be not pulled out. And I'm glad you're going to save the trees, because we planted those with the school children, the spruces. So I'm really happy about that. Let's see. Yeah, anywhere we can, I would like to make sure that you do keep kind of beachy, informal atmosphere here. That it just remembering that as we're going forward. I hope it doesn't get too fancy, I guess is my hope. And I wondered in regard to the statue, would that be carved by maybe Guy Coleman or somebody, because he did a beautiful job with the welcome man. I think everybody agrees about the food bank staying where it is. And I understood that that was a decision that was made by the council. I thought that was clear, so I'm surprised to hear there's any questioning of it. That was very important as I understood it. And I also heard from that the tribe was very much in favor of keeping that food bank because of the spirit of giving of it. So I think we need to make sure that there's no question that is going to stay there and be an integral part of this whole project. I wondered about the retaining wall. We just had a huge wall with it looks like cement, and then somebody has drawn in the cement to make it kind of look like rocks, and it looks like a fortress. I'm hoping that nothing like that could happen on this Nicoos property. I'm not quite sure I wasn't quite clear on understanding about the retaining wall, but
Jen, I've got an image pulled up right now that has the concept, which is, it's almost hard to describe it as a wall because really it's boulders that in the Southeast Plaza, the change in level is inches. As you get towards the estuary, it gets to 2.5 feet. That can be accomplished with a single rock. So we're talking about a very natural flowing collection of rocks, not a stacking or
good.
a concrete resemblance.
Okay, very good. Okay, another question about the cherry trees that are lining the First Street at this time that have been there ever since I've been here, like 35 years. I'm wondering, are those going to be retained? I have a little tablet. I don't have a big computer. So are those being planned to be left even though they're not native, or would they be removed? Is that where maybe the garden would be?
Yeah, they're right in the courtyard area.
Okay,
Yeah, so we really weren't able to retain them. And they're kind of windswept and whatnot, so they were not something that would be easily retained in that sort of concept design.
okay, well, yeah, I guess I'm sad about that. Just sad about that, but I get it.
Come back when we do the city hall.
You what?
Come back with the city hall plan.
Yeah, it's just that it's well, anyway, it's, I think the people that had their children at the grade school. And those cherry trees are all throughout the town. And it kind of begins there when you enter over the bridge. And then they're all throughout, drive through the main.
Vice Chair?
And it's just
Are you Vice Chair? I feel like you're.
I am,
Right?
I am. I feel like this isn't really turning into a proponent that you're addressing the committee, Jan. I understand everything that you're saying and can appreciate that, but it seems that you're talking more to the applicant during this comment time of being,
I'm asking questions.
right? But this is for proponents to talk to us about how you support the project and not maybe so much what you want the applicant to do. That's for the committee to propose. So I'm just maybe if there's something else, and then we can continue.
Well, isn't it a public hearing?
It is a public
And
hearing.
are we supposed to try to view information, and that includes all of us, of what we are understanding is happening? Isn't that what this is all about?
Mhm.
So I'm
Carrie, this,
confused.
Well, that's what we're not feeling like you're talking to us about what your support is.
You know the answer yet. These people are the designers of what they're presenting tonight. So I'm trying to understand what you've been presented and what I and the public, well, there's not much public, but what the public has been presented in order to help the public has moved forward.
Well, actually, the city attorney has her hand raised.
Oh, good.
Rather than,
We're awake.
Hi, Carrie.
We can hear you.
I could hear.
sorry.
Yeah.
Rather than doing this in a question and answer format, I think the better approach would be to hear this person out, let them complete their list of questions, assuming that they're within the time limit that the board would allow, and then give the applicant, the city CEDA representatives, an opportunity to respond to those questions during their rebuttal period. That would be the appropriate way to proceed.
Thank you.
I just read my questions.
Yeah.
So the murals.
Can't put a time in. Oh, I think so.
The murals from the children that are now outside, where will those be put? And I think those are different from the paintings that were suggested on the outside of the entrance or near the entrance, near the plaza there. I wanted to ask about the lighting, if it will be dark skies, if it will follow our ordinance that's in the town. I'm assuming it will. Just want to make sure. And where does this process go from here?
We already addressed that question.
As far as the council will have no input on this?
We'll answer that question. Go ahead and finish.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. I think I explained what happens from here. I don't know if anyone needs any clarification. But other than that, I think the other questions, if you would like the others to draw, would be on the murals, and then I think we heard the cherry trees. So it seems like the murals are the only thing that's left.
The murals in the dark sky compliance.
Oh, yes.
Yes, we are motivated in understanding that we are selecting fixtures that are dark sky compliant. The exterior murals, that has been a conversation from the very beginning, and we have looked at what means could be done to preserve. As we get into the design, something that wasn't so clearly shown in the images, the photos that were presented were the full back of the school building is mural. Well, we're creating openings on that side because we're losing fenestration on the south side for seismic structural reasons. We're going to lose a lot of that mural just in that process. And what's left is a mural that's painted over CMU, in some cases over basically stucco over CMU. Is it possible to salvage small sections of that? It is possible. We have not proposed to try to sell it. They would be very expensive. This is a significant retrofit, adaptive reuse of a building, and to try to go in there, with the proverbial scalpel to that degree and save some of these surface applied attributes to the school, while extremely endearing, I think maybe a better option for us would be to capture those images in photography and present those in the Heritage Lobby.
Any other proponents? Any presentations by opponents? Or staff response?
No, I think probably the biggest things that came obviously is a little bit with landscaping and the thoughts and the terms with the elk and how you make it all function correctly, so that, we get everything we're looking for, yet things aren't being destroyed and are too much maintenance. That's what I was hearing. So I don't know if that's what the board was looking at. It appears from, what I can tell, and you guys will have these deliberations, that the architecture seems good. The site seems good. So like I said, I think from a staff perspective, we were recommending approval, but understand there are some concerns that you guys may have to deliberate on.
Okay. Any reason to continue the hearing?
I feel that there is. I just have a lot of information that I still want to digest. I have closing the public hearing and
Well, that's
deliberating right
that's
now.
where I'm at. If there's no reason to continue the hearing, then I'll close.
Well, I
Close the
would
public
motion
hearing.
for continuation now if that's when we need to,
Continue to next
Continue.
month to do what?
well, to continue the discussion and to look at the information that's been presented. And to more thoroughly go through the packet
Yeah,
that I just saw a week ago.
I certainly support that. I have more questions at this point than answers.
Yeah, we have a motion to continue the hearing.
Okay, ask a couple questions.
Carrie, hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Carrie, go for it.
I just wanted to suggest that if you do have questions, it would be a good idea to ask them now before you move for a continuance, so that the applicant has an opportunity and staff has an opportunity to respond to those either tonight or at the continued hearing.
Well, that's my understanding, is that we would continue. We would discuss and then.
On the whole thing, can you? Okay.
Just comment with that. I think all we're trying to say is there's obviously some questions that you guys may have. And I think one of the things that we would like to do is that you certainly can continue it, but it would be good to kind of have that discussion in terms of some of the items so that the applicants can understand and be prepared to try to better address the questions that you may have so that they can prepare and give you the information that you're seeking.
I think that I think a little bit of the problem is that we got this a week ago and it's a lot of information, and I work 60 hours a week and I'm a volunteer. So, we're trying to digest. It's a huge project and this is a lot of responsibility. I don't want to screw up, and I don't think anybody else wants. They want to do the right thing. So,
I would like.
I just feel like I'm digesting it. Like I just a week ago got this, and it just feels like yeah, I have questions. I've dug in as much as I can, but I definitely have questions. I don't know how everybody else feels, and I don't want to stop something, but I also it's like I just got the ingredients and now I'm like, oh, I suddenly know how to the pie's done. I don't know. Terrible analogy.
Yeah, and no question about that. But if there's anything specifically right now that people have on their minds, please share so that they can have the opportunity to be better prepared to maybe get you the answers that you're seeking. If there's some that are really up front and center to you.
I personally think maybe 40 hours studying this,
Oh,
going,
geez.
going over it, and re-going over it. And it more seems like a lot is up in the air. Yeah, I mean, even tonight, many things, it's not quite decided. And so it seems like it's something difficult to fully approve because things are going to change. And you know, that's what I see. Even watching the city council meeting, city council was asking questions, and I noticed you responded by changing the windows, for instance, and also I really appreciate the fact that you recent, but you did a real upgrade to the presentation, and I appreciate that. And I know this group that maybe has a reputation we need to work on, but your comments on how easily distracted we were well, they hit home. So but then I did appreciate how you followed up. So, and then
Commissioner Clausen, if I could respond to that. I have a responsibility to my client to offer them a standard of care. The standard of care in this presentation tonight is to give you the information that you need to make a judgment on the project that is within your purview. That was not at all meant to be offensive and certainly not personal. I've never met you before. This is my first time presenting to you. I'm glad that I heard that you were there that night and that we had a chance to make some updates so that we are being as transparent as you want us to be. Every design review board is different. I don't know how easily distracted you are. My point was, I want to show you all within the boundaries of what you are tasked to do. We had 3 hours tonight to go over, as you said, a very complicated project. So to go off on tangents like the statue, for example, that's not fully developed, or an art mural that we won't have even, until we have a competition, right? And a local artist arises from that with the design. There are things that, why would we spend time showing you images that we know they are going to change? But I have to ask, is that part of approval or recommendation of approval to move forward tonight? What a statue is going to look like, what a mural is going to look like?
the question that comes up is the mural. Cannon Beach is not noted for its murals. And do we want any of them? You might call it a graffiti wall. It's not a Cannon Beach thing. And so that's as far as what the design review board does study, that falls right into our bailiwick. Do we really even want a wall like that?
If I may just remind this council, we're not coming to you with Dustin's design, Sita's design. I think I've been in this room presenting publicly upwards of a couple of dozen times. Some of those specifically for community outreach and community input. The idea of a mural to feature local artists' work was very well received. So that is a reflecting community wants and needs for this particular structure. If you come in and say, that's absolutely not something that we see happening in Cannon Beach, of course, we're going to listen. It's not what we heard during community outreach for the last year.
I think some of the other things that were mentioned, like landscaping, I mean, that one was pretty obvious in terms of the types of maybe plants and looking at the elk. And I mean, those would be, maybe some of the things that I think you guys would like to hear from the standpoint that if we're going to decide to do something like that, I think that was, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but that sounded to be front and center in terms of one of the items that you would like more information on. I don't know if there's others that you'd like to touch on.
Well, I'm wondering if the welcoming woman and the murals and the, what is it, what do you call that sign?
The blade or
The blade sign, and the Thunderbird emblem, I mean, are those, I mean, part of this application, or is that going to be, you know, in the future, those will be designed by the tribe and then come back to DRB, or will it just be because we approved this, that they're welcome to do however they see fit? And I'm not sure where it falls into the budget of this project, if there are certain items that the tribe is going to be responsible for since they're designing it and providing it. So I have that question. I don't know if that would be for staff.
Sure, and maybe one of the things I could just kind of mention on a sign would be similar to I guess a business, right? If they were to come in at a later date with a sign that was meeting the code requirements, we would issue the permit for them to move forward. If it had the different materials or things like that that are typical that we have to bring back to the board, that would be brought back at this time. So I think what was being showed was a general concept or idea as the direction that you believe you're heading. And to bring that to you to say, hey, this is where we think we're going. We don't quite know. But down the road, could they submit a sign permit application that meets things that we could sign off on from a staff perspective because it's meeting the requirements, whether the wood, and if they showed something that was wood that said Nakus or something like we saw this evening, that would be something that we could approve administratively. So that's a valid question.
Right.
And the murals and the statues.
Question about was the sign,
Right.
so if we say yay tonight, then is the sign in that? And then we have nothing.
I would say from the sign permit perspective, it is in from the standpoint of showing you a concept of what they're looking at.
Yeah.
If they came in later with a different design that was still met the ordinance and just like anyone else came to us, we would approve it administratively without it being brought back unless there were materials.
I think
So that's a valid question. I'm just answering straight so you know.
Yeah, totally. Sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think Harvey is saying too, that's a little bit vague, like the sign, and we all live here. So daily, somebody says, well, you guys approve that. I mean, there's only 1,600 people who live here. So we have to actually think about.
Right. I think the only thing I would
I mean, if somebody said it to me like today, like,
Sure.
approve that. I'm like,
Sure.
oh my God, like.
And the only thing I would say with something like that is sometimes people come with businesses and things like this ahead of time to make sure that they have the approvals to do the business
Yeah.
without knowing what they're going to do with signs because they're thinking, hey, if we can't get approved, why am I even going that route yet? And I'm not saying that's the case, but that's just an example as to, why I think at this point in time, it hasn't been totally ironed out other than to say, hey, and you guys can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but this is the concept that we're looking at. We're likely to do a blade. Yes, is this the correct design? But this is likely where it's going and likely what it's going to look like. Could it be different at some point in time? I guess the answer is yes, but I'm, looking at these guys telling you, hey, this is the concept that I think we're going with.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
There is, and I think before I even answer that, Commissioner Clausen brought up something that I said about windows in our meeting, and it was specifically about this, doing my due diligence. So that meeting that he was talking about, the public meeting with commission was with the city council, was specifically to go over what have we presented to the public, and then from that, what are we submitting to design review? We have things like interior renderings and interior details that we aren't presenting tonight, because that's not why we're here. But the question about the windows is the same question that you all are asking. We come in tonight, we're at what we would call 50% design development as far as where we're at in developing a design. And that's what we're presenting to you tonight. We don't have the level of design that we can go out and build this thing. And there's going to be things that happen between now and then, just as naturally because design is an iterative process. So at what point do we need to come back to the design review council for approval? And that was the question about the windows. If we were showing solid wood windows, sashes painted green on the outside, if we changed that to a different color, if we changed it to an aluminum window system, does that trigger us coming back into the design review board? And part of that also was, is there a method for coming back to design review board for approval without the full hearing? Is there a lesser way to present that information and have you make a decision?
Would you like to take a stab at that one, Robert? You know it a little better than me. I know it's minor review, but could you explain that
Yeah,
process a
we
little
can
bit?
talk about minor reviews. So when you have a set of approved plans, if the design review board has approved this application. And if Dustin has said, okay, the window sash is going to be painted green. And the decision is made to paint them white or to move things around. Then he would present us a modification of the plan. We would then reach out to the design review board chair with that modification, and we would say, does this meet the criteria for a minor review for you as a design review board chair to approve? And this is detailed in in section 1743, this process is. Or alternately, the design review board chair can make the decision of, no, I think this is exceeding a minor review and this needs to come in front of the whole board.
I would say that the design review board chairman can only make those decisions if the design review board empowered him to do so.
Well, the municipal code does empower him to do so.
Right.
In the code.
Yeah, it's detailed
yeah.
extensively in section 1740.
Yeah, I think where Robert's going with that is there is a section in here that talks about after the design review board has looked at some things, that if there are some minor modifications that we would be working with the chairman to kind of say, hey, we think this is a minor revision. Obviously, the chairperson would have to agree with that. If he didn't, then it would be considered a major modification. But that process is available by the zoning ordinance as part of the design review, that an applicant could come and have those discussions, just so you're aware. Thank you.
Then I would move that we, based on what we've just heard, that we continue this.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I hereby move that we continue this.
Second that.
Okay.
You'll need to move for a continuance to a date certain. You need to identify the date that you're going to have the continued hearing so that the public knows when to come to the continued hearing.
For our next
Thank you.
scheduled meeting.
I had a couple of dates. One of the things that the council has discussed is the amount of time that sometimes it takes with the 120 days and different things like that. So a couple of days that were open were Thursday, September 28th, which is next Thursday. Wednesday, October 4th were a couple of dates that we have available. So those were going to be some of the dates that we were suggesting.
The consultant won't even come close to being.
The consultant right now doesn't know what you're asking them to do.
Well, as you said, get much closer to a complete design. They're 50% now. I mean, the entire garden area is up in there. We're getting ready to get into the architecture in detail, but the architecture's up in the air.
I understand that, but they also, so there's some questions. I think from a time perspective, I think if that's the case, they understand some of the things that you're asking for. So if they can get that within that time frame and get that back to you, this is something that we also want to continue moving forward as best we can. So, I mean, those are just some of the dates that we are trying to move forward with.
Well, 120 days takes us to December 26th, right? So we have until then.
Yes, is there the need to take that much time?
I would like to hear as much public comment. I mean, if we approve this and then we're gonna, well, the DRB approved this when something, the budget or something, the elk eat all the plants or something, and we haven't been seen as doing our utmost to make sure that this project with the price tag on it, it's the right fit and the right thing for this community. Given the usage of it, the maintenance costs of the lighting,
Right.
the heat, and I think that those are things that as a committee member, I want to make sure that we know about, and that it's been said at city council that and other committees, we want to do it right.
Right.
Not just because it looks beautiful and it's a wonderful building and upgrade to the school. But there are those that the sentimentality I see is pretty much gone. I mean, there's not going to be the murals. The cherry trees are being taken out. I mean, the shape of the gym is really the only thing that is going to be a standout historical point of this structure. And then it's the 2x8s that it's built. I mean, what's going to be the maintenance going forward to keep the gym structure solid? So, those things, I think we owe it to the community. And like, as I went back to, it's a park, and I would really like to see it, the usage more inviting for just a family to go have a picnic or a local to go sit and have a glass of wine before going and watching the sunset. So those are some of my reasons, I guess, for wanting to continue
Sure.
and give the public, if we can get the word out more, for the proponents to come, and just knowing what's been discussed.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is this is an application that's been brought. You guys have heard. We may have similar discussions, and if those are concerns at that point in time, the actions are approve or deny.
Mhm.
And if those concerns aren't being met, then the board may have to, based on some of those concerns, potentially deny it.
Harry has her hand raised.
Lawyer.
Sorry to interrupt again. It is up to the board to decide what the appropriate continuance period is. I think that the staff is recommending a shorter period because this will go to the city council and will be fully vetted by them, and there will be public hearings at that point as well. The other thing I want to point out, though, is that the matter before the design review board at this point is a proposal as it is presented. I think you all need to separate your quasi judicial hat from your planning a project for the city. I understand that this is a city applicant, but it is not the board's purview to tell the city as an applicant what should or should not be included in this project, because that's not, if it's related to a criteria, that's one thing, but whether or not it reflects enough of the elementary school related elements or the child murals, those are planning decisions that rest solely in the hands of the city council. And so I think you need to keep that in mind as you're evaluating this application, because the board can't tell an applicant what can or cannot be included in a project with respect to use, with respect to mural content, with respect to sculptures. Those are solely within the purview of the applicant.
Really?
How would the structure not be within the DRB purview?
The
Yeah.
architectural design of the structure is within the purview because that's one of the criteria. But how it functions is up to the applicant.
I didn't think we were telling anyone how to use the statute.
I just wish it was one thing and then another thing and another thing because it's too much. It's like-
This is a huge project.
Yeah, this is, and then I have to digest. I know this, like, I can't, like, I'm getting all of this information right now and I don't mind, like, I like the idea of continuing. Can we continue and then continue? Can we do it twice? Just out of curiosity?
How long take you guys to get to 90%?
I really am glad that that came back around to me because I think when I initially told you 50% design development, that misled you to think that we're 50% complete in design. There are different levels of design. We're the last level of design before we start constructing this thing to build. If you want to look at it that way, we're at 90% design right now. What you see is what you get. How it comes to be, how it gets built to reflect that, that's really what's up in the air on our side right now.
And I'd like to ask the CETA representatives as a follow-up, how complete are design plans when they come before design review boards typically for projects like this?
Thank you, Carrie. So there's a few things to keep in mind here. It's typically during design development. It's typically at 50% design development. You need to have enough information to show that Design Review Commission, this is what we're proposing with minimal changes of it. At the same time, you don't want to be so far along a design that if there's something major that Design Review Commission comes back and says, this needs to change, that it is a huge encumbrance by the client and the design team and the schedule to go back and make those changes. So we want to be at a point in design where we are confident in saying, this is what it's going to look like, but not be so far down the road with how we're going to build it that it really causes a lot of schedule and budget pain to incorporate those comments and move forward. The other thing I want to say too, I'm really confused as the applicant. It's just some of the things that I'm hearing about. We have been through so many public hearings with city council and the public about design, about budget. We have gotten so far along in that process, and tonight listening to you all feels like we haven't done any. We're so far down that road.
Well, I'm sorry if we didn't get that information then, and that we're wasting your time by asking for a continuance, but I guess I just feel like we need more time to digest all this information that we're getting.
I don't believe I've suggested that. I feel like my time is being wasted. But what I would say is that, David, for every month beyond our schedule, construction gets more expensive. It doesn't get cheaper. We have a set budget to get this project complete. If we were to delay another hearing for 120 days, the cost of the project goes up. And that's something that the city does not have an appetite for.
This is unique for us because your client is our client. And if we denied it, for instance, it would go back to your client who can totally overrule us. So if we deny it, it really wouldn't go anywhere. We've already experienced that. If we continue it, at least we can keep our hand in. We could also just simply decide to waive any authority here since the city is the client anyway. So it's, we don't see this project really. I don't see it at 90%.
Jennifer from CETA has her hand raised.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond a little more clearly, I think, to what Carrie asked. I think that the set that's in front of you is beyond what we would typically supply to a DRB board. It is well vetted and well thought out and illustrates the plan. There are items like the welcoming woman and mural and items that we are specifically not clear on, and we wanted to make sure that that was well known.
we really haven't gotten even into some of the things that are in the criteria. For instance, if we could deny the architectural just based on that gigantic blank wall of the gym. That's, it's, you know, you haven't had any dormers or nothing. It's just a gigantic blank wall. So we can deny it just based on that. So it's I hope you understand where we're struggling with this.
I do. Can I respond to that? I do. It can be hard as the applicant to look through the lens of the people who are approving. I want to be clear about one thing. I'm not looking to bypass you in any way, shape, or form. You all are asking some really good questions tonight, and you're asking some questions kind of late that I haven't had a chance to respond to, like, why haven't you added anything to that roof? Structurally, because we talked about it being built at a 2x8. This was a hangar building. You can open up the ends of the building as much as you want. You so much as create a 4 foot by 4 foot opening in the side to support that. Full glulam beam, half arches. Do you know what that does to the budget? It makes this project infeasible. So I would love to be able to answer questions like that as you come up with them.
Do you even have to keep that structure? Some people may have a fondness for it, but
I think people would flip out if that was gone.
Again, and I apologize. We have received feedback throughout the community, especially later on in community outreach. Like, we didn't actually know that these were going on in some cases, and you would have had more attendance. And it sounded like from some comments made tonight that maybe you all weren't as aware as I wish you would have been coming into this meeting tonight.
I've come to a few of these meetings, but again, I'm a public servant. I'm a volunteer. I'm not being paid. So I can't spend all of my time going to all the meetings. I've dove in when I got my assignment, spent hours and hours looking at this, but I can't come to all of these things. I'm a volunteer and I feel like I'm getting like this, like, why haven't you come and why haven't you done all this? And I'm like, I'm trying.
Believe me, I'm a father of 3. I probably wouldn't be able to do as much as you have done today. And like I said, our goal here is not to bypass you all, but to make some forward progress. We're looking at this as an opportunity to move into our next step of design, which is construction documents. So to keep our schedule. I knew we weren't going to come in tonight not having 100% of the answers that you're looking for and just given full approval to go forward, or denial, right? And it basically excusing yourself of any further purview over this project. I don't want that. Like I said, you all are asking some really good questions tonight, questions that I feel are reflecting the community as a whole. And I want a chance to address those. If there's a way to do that in an expedited fashion so that we don't add cost to the project by extending the schedule significantly, that's what I'm asking for. I'd love to come back to you and give you the information that you're looking to see.
Could we have a joint council DRB meeting where we just get down to it and just approve it so that it's not, coming back to the DRB and then it has to go to council, and it prolongs it? I mean, is that a possibility?
Man.
And you do.
Why not? Council is not to do the design review board's job.
No, I'm
And
not
what I
saying
mean-
that,
but
but
what I'm
just to
saying- so
listen.
here's what I'm saying. The design review board is here to take a look at applications like tonight, not whether it's this, other ones that we've done, right? And it's tasked to the design review board, and the only way council gets involved in this stuff, other than the fact of getting it to this point and having all the public hearings that they've had and budgeting and those discussions, is they only get involved in these issues if there's an appeal to them. So other than that, a lot of the discussion that you're having and talking about are discussions that are had with elected officials about the concerns of the project.
Well, that's why.
And so if a person wants to do that, there's an avenue to speak to them, as your as your city councilor. But in this particular instance, these projects come to the design review board as an entity to review, approve, deny, and then the appeal portion goes to the council. Don't get me wrong. I understand what your question. I'm not trying to be argumentative, but procedurally, that's the process.
Well, and to be honest, I was kind of surprised when this came to the DRB because in watching some of the council meetings, it seemed like it was the questions were asked and there were discussions, there was public. And so I assumed that it was just a done deal and that the DRB didn't need to get involved. So here we are now and we're part of this project. And so we have questions. We have things that we're looking at for the first time and saying, oh, wow. Okay, so.
Sure.
When they're talking about the completion, like, I guess we're talking to the lawyer who I've never.
Yes.
The completion, like regularly, like, oh, this is about as complete as what we usually get or whatever. But it is
It's not.
$12 to $14 million of the city's money, which is.
And it's probably more complete than many of the other applications that you do see.
That's usually like.
But it's very complete. It's
Yeah.
about as a
But it
completed
is-
application as we requested of them.
I understand
by
that, but I'm saying it is.
It's a big project.
Yeah.
Yes. You're absolutely correct.
Or like,
Right.
Like-
Yeah.
How long would it take you to come back with a alternate landscape design that with some of our concerns, makes it simpler, fewer varieties of plants, more elk resistant, maybe not quite as interpretive, but more
I like that.
friendly?
I'm confused about how to approach that because there's been direction to do this for a long time. And I'm not sure how to change it without then creating another problem on my back end. There are some things I'd like to look at the elk resistant plants and that helps. But the elk are still, if they're hungry, they're probably still going to eat them. So I'm a little bit struggling in what to do. I mean, I understand you aren't excited about the garden, but I feel like that's part of what has been approved and what
Well,
we're
that's
expecting.
what I say. It's been approved, so I don't know.
Well, okay,
What are we here for?
We didn't approve it.
not about, I think your review is of the plants. In my past experience with design review boards, I don't want to tell you your job because that's inappropriate. Or, you know, your comment about the elk and your concern for that. If we can come back and find some ways to try to maintain portion of the garden protected from the elk. I don't know how, you can tell me, you live here, you know how familiar you are. Are they going to be inclined to walk into the garden from across the street at the intersection and go through the courtyard to get?
They'll come that way. They'll come up from the beach. They'll come from Spruce Street.
Okay.
Any way they can get there,
Okay.
and they'll jump, they'll
Yep.
traipse through whatever brush.
Right.
They'll get to whatever it is they want to get to.
If I can, there's been a lot of discussion and Joyce has worked with, as it was mentioned, people who have a lot of experience in native plants and all that. And I don't see a problem myself with reworking it with Roberta or
Probably Doug.
whoever else, because that is a reality. And I really wasn't saying shoot the elk. I was just, that is.
Yeah.
I didn't want you
He
to,
was agreeing with you. That they're.
You know, I think that is an issue that, you know, as somebody quoted an ancestor that said, we live with them. And so I think that design can change to meet that need. It has to.
Well, yeah, and all I'm saying is that it might take away one of the other needs that we talked about.
And that was interpretation.
That was the interpretation.
Well,
And
I think we would get creative.
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do whatever needs to be done. I just want to know what that is, to be able to satisfy what we had talked about in the past versus, well, now, how are we going to do this? I mean, is anybody open to some diversion for the elk? i.e. some form of fencing somewhere or something else, or maybe find something that they really, really love and plant it elsewhere. Wait,
I did just read an article about that.
Anita,
That's gonna be, I think,
what we're saying is,
yeah, I'm just trying to get a little bit of direction in that. Well, make everybody happy, but I can't tell you how.
What did you do in Colorado? You said you just had to do this in Colorado and dealing with the elk. Like, how do you?
It was a little bit of a different planting design. It was more shrubs and trees.
Yeah.
And I planted all elk resistant plants. But essentially I put chicken wire with stakes around plants.
Did that work?
We can do some of that, but we may just lose all the ground cover. Unless it's something that they really are not fond of. There are a couple of things. There's one plant that kind of has the taste of Pepsi soda. That might be really yummy because it's kind of sweet. That may just not be something we can.
Well, I love the idea of an interpretive native plant garden. I think I was part of the Theater Payne Foundation down in LA. So I love it. I'm totally pro it, but it feels like it's almost wasteful because it's going to be gone because they're going to eat it. And
in addition to the gardening, I mean, there are other reasons why we could deny this too. I mean, parking is inadequate, and there's virtually no disabled parking, and that's one of our criteria.
I'm sorry, that's Commissioner Clausen, that's not true. There's disabled parking that's shown.
Spaces.
There's two spaces.
Two.
2 of 7.
I mean,
Anyone want to do the percentage on that? It's more than what's required by code.
how many does Safeway have?
Excuse me?
You're two spaces for a facility that's going to have this kind of
28 even.
occupancy is probably not enough. And you didn't provide any service area for deliveries.
That again, that's not true. There is a pull-out area right in front of the gym to support that function.
But
There's a gravel road that goes around the back to the food bank that you can drive on top of that north courtyard for that function. I think we even specified that in our presentation.
in your discussion, you said you had no provision for deliveries.
That is, I did not say that,
Okay.
but good thing this is recorded. We can go back and take a look, but
it's as some of it's going into the street. Is the street becoming one way? Is that what's happening?
no, it's becoming a 30-foot wide right of way, still with 2 lanes. There's just less shoulder space.
Okay. I mean, these are just like things that you have to ask.
It's a lot of,
It's overwhelming.
it's a really good question. A lot of what happens in that extra public right of way. So you've got, right now a 50-foot public right of way and maybe 20 feet of pavement out there existing, maybe even less, is for landscaping and sidewalks. That is what we are providing on the acquired property from the street for safety of pedestrians getting from the southeast courtyard to the front entrance of the heritage lobby. So it's very much still performing that function. And actually with the 30 feet, we can get a two-way road in there with wider lanes than is currently there.
I have a question if I can. Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I'll see why you can't.
So part of my role in this is to start to forecast material procurement and lead times and costs. So I'm wondering if there's anything about the project that you do like that I can keep on trying to forecast those items and like the architectural columns or, the roof lines. I haven't heard anything about that yet.
I think the architectural design is beautiful, so I don't have any problem with that. One of the things I think that I might like to see is how the food bank might be incorporated going down the road or whenever that might happen, just to kind of give us a feel for what you can design there that would fit in with classrooms and gymnasium.
And as soon as that gets put into our scope, we can jump right on top.
Mhm. Well, just hearing that that is going to be there is reassuring.
I don't think we can dismiss that. A major criteria is the design avoids monotony and provides visual interest and charm by giving sufficient attention to architectural details and to such design elements as texture, pattern, and color. Both the white roof and the new roof on the half-round structure would provide monotony and lack charm. And the classroom white roof can certainly be seen from any second-story window.
And that may be just an opinion of one of the members. That may just be an opinion because there is a lot of significant articulation, shadow lines. There's columns, there's lots of different architectural elements that have been added to this. You as a design review member have the opportunity to certainly state and feel that way and make your decision based on what you feel. But in terms of from a staff perspective, I think the articulation and the building design is excellent.
But
I like the white roof.
but the criteria D, it just
I'm just saying that's an opinion, right? We all have our own takes on it, can be subjective. And that might be your case. That may not be the case of others.
may not be, no.
That's correct. And that's why there's a board that votes on it.
All right, well, we can make a decision as far as a date for the continuation. I'm out of town on the 4th. I don't know, if that gives you enough time. And if you really know what it is that we're asking, if we really know what we're
I
asking.
personally would like to know more about the sign. I mean, I know is there a name for it? Is it called Hiku's? Or can we come back to that later? And
Well, that's what it sounds like.
I'm fine. I'm fine with the architecture, et cetera. But there's bits of it that you can't just.
Can we have a continuation just on certain specific criteria? So if we approve the architecture and we approve the site plan, can we either ask for a continuation of the landscape or with conditions, or just deny it as is?
Yeah.
So maybe that's where we want to go.
Anita, can I just interject one more time to say, as simple as it would be for us to just have to deny it and then we go to our client, have them approve it. That's not what this project is about. This has been a divisive project throughout the community outreach event. It is a goal that I think is fully achievable, that this project and works to bring people together, and that's not going to happen if we're bypassing you. I want you involved. I heard some of the things that you said tonight. I would like to come back. I think what you're proposing with coming back with certain elements that we have questions about makes a lot of sense, in letting us move forward with the architecture, where that is the bulk of where we're going to be spending our time from here on out to detail, so that David can continue his pricing and get it better ironed out and look for savings and that kind of thing without affecting the overall timeline. I want to come back. I think we need a better elk resistant plan. I think we can do that by simplifying, some of the plants, the plant list that we're using. And it sounds like the tribe is willing to entertain that idea. I really heard you in saying that. I want to walk by this place and feel like I'm welcome to go over there and have a picnic. And I look at what we're presenting tonight and it's like, yeah, I get it. It looks very formal in there. There's simple things. We can keep that Thunder Garden design. However, have a more direct, wider, more welcoming path for common patrons of the set. They don't want to go through the Heritage Garden every single time to get to the back or to go through the Heritage Lobby. I wish we would come here with that tonight because I think that's a better design solution. And I'd like to bring that to you. I'm just hoping it doesn't hold things up that.
How
Right.
much time you need to do that?
Can I ask a question on sort of like on the conditions of approval option? Those are great because that's a direction and I appreciate that. I would like to keep the Thunderbird format because that's been, I believe that was very, very important. The back half, happy to change any way you want because that's just example of plants that grow there without necessarily any kind of description or what have you. And it could be an area where you could have a picnic or sit, although if I were having a picnic, I might want to go further from the road. And, you know, make use of some of the existing trees that are at the other end, but that's just my opinion and forget I said that.
I think there's a simple way to keep the Thunder Garden design, the Thunderhead design,
Mhm.
but to have a very wide and welcoming view corridor from a main entry point into the site from the east that says this is still a park. We've got this really cool interpretive garden you can choose to walk through, or you can just go have a picnic. I think that's a completely valid statement.
Well, I don't know where, are you talking about in that same space where the Thunder Garden is? Because there's really not much room for an additional pathway.
I think we can slightly modify our design to widen
One of them.
some path. And when I say a view corridor, I'm saying that we eliminate tall plants from this view corridor so that you can see to the interior of the site.
Okay. Okay,
Do you feel like that's a?
fine.
Well, we asked for a continuation. We've gotten to a point where I'm hearing that, you know, we could be helpful in moving this along by approving the site plan and the architecture plan and either denying or approving the landscape with conditions based on what we've discussed with the applicant. Or we can just continue with the continuance. I'm open to whatever the majority of my fellow committee members want to do, but I want to be respectful to all the time that this group has put into this project, coming to the many meetings that if they've committed to. So in recognizing that, I feel I don't want to hold this up unnecessarily. Since council has asked a lot of the questions.
You're gone on the 4th. But
I'm gone on the 4th, yes, and I don't know that the 28th is.
I just,
We've got a calendar up. I don't know if that helps anybody.
I have the calendar. Okay.
So our next scheduled meeting would be the 19th.
What did you say? The September?
November.
28th, that was just open next week.
Our next month's meeting is the 19th, correct?
I'm okay with it.
Correct.
I don't know.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah,
I'm okay with next week.
now that's where,
If there's
If-
time for them to.
It seemed like, I mean,
respond.
I'm asking about, I don't understand really what's going on with the sign. Is that approved? Do we wait for that later? Like, I'd like to absorb and
Michelle, my understanding is that the signage is going to be a separate permit, but does come back and.
okay, that's what I was asking is like, okay, it's in here, but
Yeah, no, that
what's going on? Like,
comes back. I don't know about welcome women.
I don't, that's fine. I don't.
landscaping, wouldn't she be part of the landscaping?
I mean, she's in the center of like a seating area. Up with some, I'm not quite sure. I don't.
Yeah, so that's where, you know, maybe just getting a little bit better idea of how that process is going to work with,
It would be separate.
if it, but would it come back before the design review?
That may
Sure it
well be a separate application.
Okay.
So if we did come back and represented next week, our changes. What I'm hearing tonight is what we talked about, having a view corridor as you're a pedestrian, even a car driving by, that you can still see the function of the interior of the site. It's a park. We don't want to drive people away and not feel welcome coming in here. That's exactly opposite of what we're trying to do. We need to fix that. Simplifying the planting plans and coming up with some idea of how we're going to handle the elk. What else am I missing that you might want to see?
I could email you tomorrow.
Just, yeah, I know it's getting late and there's just so much.
Well, and also it's just absorbing. It's like, I mean,
Email Steve your questions, email Steve
Okay.
your questions.
oh, really?
Okay,
It's gonna be forwarded on.
okay.
Oh. Cool.
So the only problem that I foresee with that is getting to a day tonight if we don't know what we're having to address in this case in a week. Just,
I don't know, yeah.
So it might be that that's a little ambitious on the 28th. So I would almost, it would give us time to ask our questions and then give time to come back. So I would almost suggest that at our next monthly meeting on the 19th, that we would.
But what if we have others?
That we would be able to move forward. I mean, that's how I see it.
Other things, so if it's
Like what? What color paint on something?
that took a long time with the
Dates between the 4th and the 19th that would work.
I don't know all our meeting schedules as far as, I just looked at those two because I know those were open as far as between another.
It's on down.
Bear with us 1 second.
Is there a meeting on the 4th, a city council meeting?
On the 3rd,
Yeah, there's council
Yeah, there's
on the 4th.
on the 4th?
Oh,
Oh,
Or I'm sorry, 2nd and 3rd.
Is it City Hall?
That's all.
4th is open. Yeah, that was one of the dates I was
I don't know.
suggesting was that October 4th.
I know there's.
So I thought I had another meeting here on
there's
It
a
may have been the
10-5
third.
meeting for City Hall. That was it.
10:05.
October 5th.
the reason that you don't want to have it on the 19th, had our next scheduled meeting.
10-9
Go for it if you want.
City Council.
If the schedule is okay, it's fine with me.
Well, it would be during our
If
regularly
that
scheduled meeting
Yeah.
and just continue it to that
takes it too far downstream is what I'm wondering.
on the 19th, next month. Well,
It's up to you guys.
we have until December for the 120 days, if that's what you're worried about. This would be October. You just want to be done with it. You just want to move it off
Well,
the
what you-
agenda. I don't want to
but
talk about it.
What you might do is you could continue it until Thursday, September 28th. And if it turns out that the questions that come in require more from the applicant than is able to be produced and give you time to digest it by next Thursday, then you could continue it again if that's necessary, would be another
I like,
alternative. Like
this next meeting.
you needed another choice.
oh,
Right.
I like-
We don't. I think we can.
I
I'm
think-
sorry.
yeah,
Oh, it's fine, but
I like the next meeting idea.
okay. Because that'll give us
How
time.
do you feel about that? The
Would
19th.
you be okay if
19th,
continued until our next meeting?
I'm fine with that.
on the 19th of next
Next
month.
month.
Is that a?
It was, yeah.
for
It was 2 days ago.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, we want this board support, this commission support. So
Yeah.
if that means coming back in a month and addressing your questions. That's what we're gonna do.
And just so that when it goes to council, that hopefully we've asked every single question and thought of every single component that anybody can, so that we can get it going
Feel
forward.
comfortable too.
So, okay?
Yeah.
Right. So need to make a motion to continue it to next month's meeting. Is that where we're at? So I think it's the 19th. Is it October 19th, Robert?
Yes.
Yes.
Looking at it.
I retract my motion, and so whatever motion you have in mind, please create it.
All right, I will make a motion to continue this hearing to our next scheduled meeting of October 19th.
I second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to get a full-size set of the landscape plans so that I can actually see it. It's 8.5 by 11. Drawings are ridiculous.
We have to finish. We have to do.
Yeah, I think there's, I don't know if we had any other items.
No, it's the side of the order.
And not in my purview, but the bathrooms.
Well,
I was just gonna indicate, someone else had mentioned previously that, Jen,
I don't know why they don't just do that.
I don't know either. I don't get it. So 2017.
any other-
What? Oh, gonna be it.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here and that you have enough to go on at this point. And that I would hope that within the next week that there are any additional questions that this committee would submit them to Steve and Robert and get them to you so that we can all be ready to go on the 19th. Okay,
Sounds like a plan.
okay.
If you've done some additional questions, please to me.
You can do that, right? So that,
Did you do that?
if anything, I can make sure that happens.
Yeah.
okay, yes.
Mistake when I first was on and I emailed everybody. I didn't know.
It would be nice,
Send it my way and I'll
Yeah.
make sure that
okay,
happens.
because it would be nice to know what some other committee
Sure,
questions are as, you know,
sounds good.
could trigger something else or.
I think we can adjourn.
All right, thank you, everybody.